Figure TV. No way out for Trump except defeat. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the house of revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Trump, no way out for him. Let's get into the content. Salute.
Donald Trump has gone totally mute over the past 24 hours from the American public as he prepares to surrender to Iran. What he's working on behind the scenes right now is a face-saving measure so he can give Iran what Iran wants, but so Donald Trump doesn't have to show what really took place, which is that he did a far weaker deal than former President Obama's JCPOA. One of the critical existential issues that the United States is dealing with, and this is the real reason why Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was at the White House yesterday, is that the United States, and frankly the world, is now running out of oil. We're running out of the sheer barrels of oil necessary in order to fuel the day-to-day economic activity needed to survive. And it's getting to this critical juncture where it's just a week or two away from the entire system breaking, especially if there's any glitches that take place in any of these oil facilities that often take place in the summer. That's what's really going down. And also, right now, the U.S. drones and planes are finding that Iran is able to target them at a level far more efficient than when the war even started. I mean, yet again, yesterday, and again, this is not going to be reported anywhere else or in corporate news, but in the Bushehr region, Iran was able to strike down another MQ-9 Reaper drone. Again, just the United States CENTCOM just covers it up. And this follows another MQ-9 Reaper being shot down a few days back. I mean, there's probably close to $1 billion in MQ-9 Reaper drones alone from the United States that have been destroyed. Now, a source very close to MB Ghalibaf, that's Iran's parliament leader, lead negotiator, posted the following message. Contrary to the claims of Western sources, from Iran's perspective, this is not the text of the final agreement draft that people in the Trump regime have been leaking to Axios, and disagreements continue. The United States requests an agreement multiple times a day through various channels, but Iran has rejected these requests and emphasizes continuing the exchanges of messages until Iran's goals are fully achieved. Iran's conditions in the potential agreement have not yet been met, and there is a possibility of one-sided spin by Trump regarding the text. Then Donald Trump sends out J.D. Vance, while Donald Trump has gone mute over the past 24 hours. You had Treasury Secretary Bessent give a disastrous press conference. Then J.D. Vance, he's out there saying, I think we're doing good. I think we're close to a deal. I think Iran is negotiating in good faith. I think we're getting very close. So I just want you to think about what MB Ghalibaf's aide is essentially saying and what J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, is saying. Here, play this clip.
Stockpile and also the question of enrichment. So, we're going back and forth with them. We do think they're negotiating, at least so far, in good faith, and we're making some progress. Hopefully, we'll continue to make progress. The president will be in a position where he can endorse the agreement, but obviously, that's still TBD.
Now, another member of Iran's parliament, Abraham Razai, posted the following message as well. The fact that Trump insists after every confrontation and the IRGC's decisive response that he has not entered into a war with Iran and that the ceasefire still exists is a sign of the enemy's weakness and their fear of returning to war. Diplomats must not let go of the enemy's point of weakness and must impose maximum demands on him. And so Iran rightfully reads Donald Trump's move every time there's a increase in the hostilities where the U.S. will strike an area near the Hormuz Strait. What does Trump say? We're not at war. We're not at war. The ceasefire is still holding. The ceasefire is still holding. And so Iran views that as, okay, got it. You're terrified of war because that would destroy the economy and that would destroy the global economy. That's your sensitive spot. Let's press on that. And Iran knows that they've got the leverage. And then Donald Trump just disappears for the day. Just think about that. Earlier this week, Donald Trump had that very suspicious meeting at Walter Reed where they claimed the visit to Walter Reed, where he said it was for an annual checkup. But we know all of the red flags there that we've talked about. Then he disappears for like a day, like the critical day that began with Barack Ravid of Axios saying, we've got a deal. We've got a peace deal, everybody. It's a deal to negotiate a memorandum of understanding to then negotiate in 60 days nuclear enrichment. Maybe. Okay, that's not a deal, but that's, again, showing weakness. That shows utter weakness. And because it shows that you're just all over the place. And then you have Vice President J.D. Vance again from the tarmac. Again, as Donald Trump's nowhere to be found. J.D. Vance is like, look, if you look at we've accomplished, like we've kind of done all of our objectives. Like we've done a good job, and now we just need to open up the Strait of Hormuz, and that's our final objective. Your final objective. It was open before you launched this catastrophic war against Iran with Netanyahu. Here's what J.D. Vance said. Play this clip.
So that's why we have verification processes in place. I will say, this is my last comment on this, if you look at what we've already accomplished here, assuming that we're able to get to a final agreement here, we're reopening the Straits of Hormuz, we've already decimated their conventional military, and we're in a position where we could substantially set back their nuclear program, not just during the term of this president, but over the long term. That's a very, very good thing for the American people. So.
And then they brought out Stephen Miller while Donald Trump was MIA. And Stephen Miller's like, for 4 weeks, we decimated Iran. We destroyed them. Okay, well, if you decimated them and you destroyed them and they don't have a navy, then why is the Strait of Hormuz closed? Why does Donald Trump always say, oh, we're not in a war, we're not in a war, we're not in a war? Why is the Islamic Republic still in power? If you decimate it, and it doesn't look like decimation and destruction, I think the American people are far smarter than you, Stephen Miller. Here, play this clip.
Homeland Security Advisor. All right, Miller, deal or no deal?
Well, as you said, President Trump is the one who's going to make that decision, and President Trump alone. He's directly, personally involved in the negotiations, making sure that the results are up to his standards. As you've outlined, Iran has made significant material and dramatic concessions to the United States that would have been impossible only a short time ago because of the military battlefield defeat that they have suffered and the embargo continuing to choke the life out of their economy.
But folks, Axios and Barack Ravid, here they go again. Last night into the morning, here's what they post. Vance says U.S. and Iran are very close to a deal. I can't guarantee that we're going to get there, but right now I feel pretty good about it, the VP said. My report at Axios. Right, Barack Ravid began yesterday morning saying, we've got a deal. It's just waiting on Donald Trump's approval. And that's where you go. More from J.D. Vance right here, who says, look, ceasefires get a little messy. Sometimes the guys at the lower level aren't communicating with the guys at the top level. That's what's going on in Iran. No, that's not what's going on in Iran. And again, you're demonstrating that you are a weak and cornered rat. Do you get that? Because you can try to spin, I guess, our markets here in the US, but Iran knows what's happening. The rest of the world knows what's happening. The United States tries to strike an area near Bandar Abbas, some port city in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is able to detect the American drone, or able to detect if the U.S. is trying to get a tanker to leave the Strait of Hormuz by turning off its signaling, and Iran stops it. That oftentimes leads to the U.S., responding by attacking an area in Iran. Iran responds, and then Trump's like, whoa, we're not at a war. We're still in the ceasefire. We're still negotiating. you're not tricking Iran. Like, they know what's going on. Here's what JD Vance says. Here, play this clip.
You just said now that we believe that Iran is negotiating in good faith. But why do we believe that the ceasefire is holding when we keep on intercepting missiles that keep on striking?
Well, these ceasefires are always a little messy. And sometimes the guys at the lower level aren't communicating with the guys at the top level. Sometimes people make mistakes. But even when the ceasefire is holding, as we've seen, not just in Iran, but all over the world, sometimes these things have little flare-ups. I think our approach has been to enforce the ceasefire, to defend ourselves when fired upon. The president's been very clear that if we're fired upon, we're going to fire back. But if you compare the conflict now to where it was 5-6 weeks ago, I think the president's ceasefire is very much holding.
And then Ibrahim Azizi, the National Security Council leader for the parliament, he says Iran's not backing down from its red lines, such as the right to enrichment and enriched uranium management of the Strait of Hormuz and the lifting of sanctions in the face of Trump's rhetoric. Everyone knows now that Trump, in order to save himself from this strategic deadlock, resorts to this tool of threats one day and begs for an agreement the next. That's where we are. And so what Trump and J.D. Vance are trying to work on right now, and the New York Times reported, is they're trying to develop a workaround to funnel money to Iran, billions of dollars, without directly paying Iran billions of dollars. So Gulf Arab states have been lobbied by Trump. Can you help us maybe with a loan, a $300 billion investment fund for Iran? Could we do something so that maybe we pay you and you pay Iran, so it doesn't look like we've paid Iran directly, so I can say I did a stronger deal than Obama? That's what's going on behind the scenes right now, because Iran says there's no deal until you wire us $12 billion. Otherwise, we don't trust you. And Trump doesn't want to wire the $12 billion because then he says that that's worse than what Obama did, so I can't do that. And so that's what's going on behind the scenes right now. And as I mentioned from the outset, here, let's talk about the facts of the oil shortage that's taking place. So we are 9 million barrels away from hitting a storage level, as HFI Research explains. That's equivalent to living paycheck to paycheck for gasoline and distillate. Once we get there, even a minor disruption, any sort of outage, will result in gasoline lines at gas stations in the United States. And so we're really doing this. So U.S. oil stockpiles fall for a fifth straight week as global inventories approach, quote, unheard of inventory levels. And Drop Site is quoting this ExxonMobil executive warning Thursday that a price spike is now weeks away. We're approaching unheard of inventory levels, said Exxon Senior VP Neil Chapman. Really, really low levels. Once you get to that point, then you'll see prices shoot up. So you could see Brent crude spike to $150, $160, $160 per barrel very quickly right now. Brent futures right now are at $94, holding hope that there could be a deal. But as JP Morgan warns, there's only about 800 million barrels that are actually usable without straining the supply chain. The system doesn't fail because oil disappears. It fails because the circulation network no longer has enough volume. If the Hormuz Strait stays closed, JP Morgan projects critically low inventories of 6.8 billion barrels by September, and Rapidan Energy warns of a severe economic contraction before quarter three, if that takes place. And as Rosemary Kalanick explains, something I think people don't fully understand is that global oil inventories don't need to hit zero to cause massive price havoc. If the system dips below 7 billion barrels, circulation seizes up and the energy system fails. Markets will push up prices to avert systemic failure. Before that happens, Trump's war brought us from about 8 billion barrels in February to 7.6 billion barrels today. At these prices, if Hormuz stays closed into September, we'd be at that 6.8 billion barrels, which is below critical levels. Thus, oil prices will spike before September to destroy the demand to keep the inventories intact, basic economics. That level of spike to $150 or even $200 per barrel will then cause a severe economic contraction. So that's what Treasury Secretary Bessent realizes. That's what the U.S. realizes, that now we're staring that down. Guess who also realizes that right now? Iran. And so the U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent can continue sanctioning Iran. We're sanctioning this. We're sanctioning that. We're sanctioning this. We're going to starve them. Well, you've already thrown everything you can at them. So now Iran goes, got it. We can wait this out because every day that passes, we get closer for those billion-barrel threshold to hit that critical level, at which point the global economy gets destroyed. And they know that's where we can break Donald Trump. That's where we can get the best deal for Iran. And so that's the point that we're at kind of right now. So if you wonder, Ben, there seems to be this frenzy and Trump seems extra desperate. We're at that point, which many people thought would have arrived sooner, but we're here. Maybe another week, maybe a week and a few days, but we're at this point where we'll be heading to global depression territory. Like we're like days away from it. And so that's what's driving a lot of this. Now, I want to give a quick update as well. You know, we reported yesterday, last night, Russia drone hit a Romanian apartment complex. Romania is very close to Ukraine, and it was believed that the drone was targeting Ukraine. Russia didn't really even put out statements to even say that. They didn't care. NATO put out kind of a weak sauce statement. This is what the statement from NATO was without the U.S. backing it. Early this morning, an apartment building in Romania was struck by a drone as Russia attacked Ukrainian infrastructure near the border. We condemn Russia's recklessness, and NATO will continue to strengthen our defenses against all threats, including drones, but nothing from Trump. We heard some other NATO nations, respond strongly, but nothing from Trump. This is what happens when he's weak in NATO significantly. We'll keep you posted there. And then what Trump was focused on, though, and again, while he was not posting or giving any speeches or anything, Trump administration is paying millions to quickly cover 4 enormous bronze horses with extra thick 23.75 karat gold leaf. The money for the rush job is coming from the National Park Service. As Anna Kramer writes, I found $100 million spent on these new DC projects, including this 23.75 karat gold leaf thing. All the American people are suffering and just want health care and want to be able to afford homes and afford groceries and afford rent. That's what's going on. We'll keep you posted every step of the way. I hope you appreciate the level of detail that we dig into here on the Midas Touchdown. You deserve to know what's really happening out there. And I trust that the economic analysis that we give, really getting into the weeds, is what's really needed in this moment, because we don't need to hear talking heads shouting and yelling. We need facts. That's what we're doing here together. So hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We appreciate you.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others.
Three points in his tweet. One, we seek concession not through dialogue, but with missiles. In negotiations, we merely make them understood, make them understand.
Right.
We have not trust we have no trust in guarantees or words. Only actions are the measure. No actions will be taken before the other side acts. The winner of any agreement is the one who is better prepared for war, for the day after. Here is what it. Do you feel any sort of negotiations or talk or peace happening? You're understanding.
Yeah, no, they're the United States is strangely silent right now, and let's put it into time frame. I judge it in like 12 hours ago, so it's 10 p.m. at night. That is early morning Iran time, and there was no action. 24 hours before that is what you just described, where the 4 ships tried to go through the strait, and Iran stopped them. We don't know if they fired missiles directly at the ships but it stopped it. And in response to that, the United States attacked. They launched some bombs, but apparently they didn't hit anything important. However, Iran fired a missile as a warning shot at the airbase in Kuwait, from where those flights, these combat air patrols, had originated. Then 24 hours before that, there had been a similar ship tried to sneak through. Iran stopped it. That one, the United States killed 4 sailors in small boats. So they hit Iranian targets. So as we look at this progression, on day 1, it was very aggressive. They hit and killed Iranians. Day 2, they fired shots, but they didn't kill Iranians. And now in the last 12 hours, they haven't responded at all, the United States. So that tells me that there's something going on, that Iran has delivered a message to the United States. And I think the combination of that missile that was fired at Kuwait, because they put the U.S. on notice, we're going to destroy this airbase if you keep this up. We're not going to break the ceasefire, but if you continue to attack and provoke, we're going to take out that airbase. And as a consequence of that, right now we've seen at least, I don't know if it's permanent or at least a temporary standing down of U.S. aggressive missions against Iran. Iran's positions have been very, very clear, and they were contradicted yesterday by what Donald Trump said. Iran wants immediate sanction relief, and they want their assets unfrozen. Trump yesterday said, no, there's not going to be any immediate sanctions release, and we're not unfreezing a single thing. Iran's going to maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump says, no, they're not. So despite claiming, oh, yeah, man, we're really near an agreement, if what Trump is saying reflects the U.S. position, they're nowhere near at all. But the United States keeps coming back to the nuclear issue. Iran has said that's for discussion later. That's not for discussion now. The now issue is get the sanction relief, return the frozen assets. We'll maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz, and this war against the Palestinians and Lebanese has got to stop now.
Carl.
Well, I think Larry has described it pretty well. I would add that his last point, which I think is adamant with the Iranians, ain't going to happen. Bibi is going full hog and looks like he might go for the entire country of Lebanon before it's over with. And he's even got people in Beirut now screaming and hollering because he's attacking with the Air Force assets that clearly aren't Hezbollah. Or if they're Hezbollah, it's a real stretch to prove that they are. So that's the fly in the ointment as far as I see it tactically on the ground. That Bibi Netanyahu is paying no attention to this at all. But a bigger problem, I think, Larry just referred to indirectly perhaps, but nonetheless he referred to it, and that is that if we do have any diplomacy going on, even through third parties, through Oman, Pakistani, whomever, if we do have any going on, how do you conduct it coherently when Donald Trump makes these pronouncements all the time, which are probably as divorced from anything they're doing on the ground with third parties in terms of diplomatic maneuvers completely. So you get one person, people, exchange, whatever on the ground that forms some view of one particular issue, like, for example, the Strait of Hormuz. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump comes out and condemns Oman or some other egregious move. How the hell do you do any coherent diplomacy with your prime diplomat? And that's what the president is supposed to be, really, making these pronouncements all the time. They're disconnected from reality and disconnected probably most of the time from the diplomacy being conducted, third party or otherwise. I don't know how you do this. I simply don't. And is it just to keep everything so confused? So essentially Bibi can do what he wants to whenever he wants to. Now he's expanded in Gaza and he's going full bore again in Gaza. And he is talking about, this was in the Haaretz headline this morning, he's talking about 70%. How do you get 70% of Lebanon and stay anywhere near the Litani River? This is crazy. It's just crazy. You can't figure out what's happening, and I think it reflects Trump's desperation. I think he does not know how to get out of the mess he's got himself into, but he does have some visceral view that he needs to.
Hey, this just came across the wire from Donald Trump. Iran must agree that they will never have nuclear weapon or bomb. The Hormuz Strait must be immediately open, no tolls for unrestricted shipping traffic in both directions. All water mines, bombs, if any, will be terminated. And we have removed through detonation numerous such mines with our great underwater mine sweepers. Iran will complete the immediate removal and or detonation of any mines that are left, which will not be many. Ships caught in the strait due to our amazing and unprecedented naval blockade, which will now be lifted, may start the process of heading home. Say hello to your wives, husbands, parents, and families from me, your favorite president. The enriched material, sometimes referred to as nuclear dust, which is buried deep underground with virtually collapsed mountains, caused by our powerful B-2 bomber attack 11 months ago, sitting on top of it, will be unearthed by the United States, which it is agreed is the only country, along with China, with the mechanical capability of doing so, in close coordination and conjunction with the Islamic Republic of Iran, plus the International Atomic Energy Agency, and destroyed. Doesn't make sense, but that's what it says. No money will be exchanged until further notice. Other items of far less importance have been agreed to. I'll be meeting now in the Situation Room to make a final determination. Thanks for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump. There's so much wrong with that.
And who wrote it for him? I mean,
yeah.
A hodgepodge of Defense Department, State Department, and Trump's lackeys. I mean, who wrote that crap for him?
Stephen Miller.
I don't know if that's Miller. There's this one woman, young woman. She's in her 20s. I wouldn't be surprised if she's writing. She's being told what to write. She writes it. And with the mines as an example, the United States hasn't exploded a bunch of them. Number one, but by the Department of Defense's own estimate, it's going to take 6 months to clean the mines up. 6 months, okay? So, and that's assuming that there's no threat from Iran. Iran is not going to allow the United States to come in and, quote, dig up the nuclear dust. That ain't happening. There would be, if any Iranian that agreed to that, there'd be a coup. So you've got that. And Iran has, we'll see what is actually going to be agreed upon in the Situation Room. The things that Trump says, all these other items of less importance, those are actually the key items.
Yeah. Carl, I really feel that Stephen Miller has a very substantial role in the Trump administration.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
Yeah, together with Jared Kushner. these are two important characters. One of them is part of the administration. The other one, Jared Kushner, is not even part of the administration. But he's so important. Here is what Stephen Miller said about the situation in the Middle East.
When did he say this?
President Trump is the one who's going to make that decision, and President Trump alone. He's directly, personally involved in the negotiations, making sure that the results are up to his standards. As you've outlined, Iran has made significant material and dramatic concessions to the United States that would have been impossible only a short time ago because of the military battlefield defeat that they have suffered and the embargo continuing to choke the life out of their economy. But let's understand something else. It's very important to baseline this all on where we are today versus where we started. When Obama signed the Iran nuclear deal, the so-called JCPOA, Iran was on a guaranteed path to a nuclear weapon, to being the dominant power in the region, to being the richest and most militarily threatening nation in the entire Middle East, with the ability to launch ballistic and ultimately nuclear weapons to Europe and eventually the United States. Now, because of President Trump, their economy has been dismantled. Their nuclear program under Operation Midnight Hammer has been obliterated. Their entire defense industrial base has been eradicated. Their navy's at the bottom of the sea. Their air force at the bottom of the sea. Their entire leadership class has been decapitated. It is the most complete, thorough, total military thrashing in the history of armed conflict. 4 weeks and a country decimated to that degree, to that extent. And now here we are at the end of that with Iran putting on the table a complete reopening of the strait, as has been discussed, and many other concessions that are going to be unveiled in the time to come. But again, there's no deal until there's a deal. Nothing's final till it's final. And President Trump's been clear that he reserves the option now or at any time in the future to do whatever is necessary to defend and protect America's national security.
Let me make a couple of administrative comments before we go into the real meat of it. Look under his name. It says Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. I've been very close to 4 presidential administrations, intimately so with 2. Never in the history of presidential administrations has a deputy, mind you, chief of staff had such power as he just intimated and had such a position to articulate the lies written for him by Israel that he just articulated. And how do I know that Israel wrote most of that? Because it's been coming out in Haaretz and little pieces from Bibi and others for about a week or 2 already. Stephen Miller is an agent working in the White House for Bibi Netanyahu. Of course, we've all known that all along. But to have this prominence when he gets it in his mind to come out and speak like he did there is a bastardization of everything the system stands for, particularly in the White House. The deputy chiefs of staff are supposed to manage the cabinet level and other equivalent agencies within the government. One of them manages half, maybe it includes state, treasury, and a couple of others. The other one manages the other half. That's not what they're doing. They're letting him be a spokesperson for Bibi Netanyahu from the podium of the President of the United States. And most of what he said there was propaganda and very difficult to determine if any of it is true, but pretty well determined that a lot of it was false. So why is he occupying this position that the president himself or the chief of staff, if he empowers her to be so, ought to be articulating? I would say it shouldn't be any of the administration of the chiefs of staff, deputies or primaries. It should be the Secretary of State, the Secretary of War, if he could speak intelligibly, or someone else empowered in the mainstream of the cabinet to speak. Why is he speaking? That's the big administrative question. Why is he speaking? As if he were the president of the United States, and in real terms, more articulately, but lying much the way the president does. This is a mystery to me. Administratively, this is a mystery. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Larry, the last sentence he said, I think is so important for Iranians. He said, it doesn't matter what they get by these talks and negotiation, we could so-called negotiations, all options are on the table. It means that the United States can decide to attack Iran over and over. It depends on the decision on the part of the President of the United States. This is the whole concept of this. Is the whole problem with the Iranians right now. They're talking about what is the main point of talking with the United States if we finally get to the battlefield. So let's do it on the battlefield. What is the point of talking with Americans? When it comes to the nuclear program, they're basically talking about there is no point on that. If you're part of NPT, then we can enrich uranium. If that's the problem, we can get out of NPT. There are many people are arguing that right now.
Yeah, the narrative construction that Miller was engaged in to paint Iran as so desperate, they're so damaged, so defeated, that they'll accept any agreement now. That we the United States have beat them down, and they're begging for an agreement. Well, that's just simply not true. In fact, the opposite is true. It's the United States that's begging for an agreement. I'd recommend, not to do cross advertising, but Danny Davis had a geologist, an oil expert named Art Berman, did an hour-long interview with him the other day, and I'd really encourage people to go watch that, because he provides a lesson on what's really going on in the oil market. And despite, like here was Donald Trump yesterday claiming, oh man, the United States, we're the biggest on the oil and everything else. And Berman had a great metaphor. He said, let's assume that oil's like alcohol. So what do you want to drink? Are you looking to just throw back a few beers or some wine? Or do you want to get drunk? If you want to get drunk, break out, the Jack Daniel's 100 proof. He says the U.S. oil is really, it's the equivalent of light beer and wine. It's not really the kind of oil it's not the oil that's needed to produce diesel. And the diesel oil comes from, it's imported. So the United States is actually importing 10% of its oil. Now, these are things I didn't know, but he had the facts out. So what he's suggesting is the economic consequences from this shutdown of oil out of the Persian Gulf is the real experts know it's building and building and building, and when it explodes on us, when the final impact comes, it's going to be devastating. So that's what's in the back. That's what's driving in the back of the mind, the Trump folks. We got to get a deal with Iran. But what Stephen Miller said there regarding the suggesting such total U.S. dominance, it's just it's dangerous. What I don't know is, does he really believe his own bullshit?
Yeah.
Or is he just saying that in order to, for the public relations line, public diplomacy part, but secretly he knows how screwed they are? That I don't know.
And it's far more dangerous, Nima, if he believes it. Far more dangerous, in my view.
I agree.
Yeah. Larry, Colonel, how do you see the role of Pakistan in what's going on right now? Pakistan is talking to Iranians, to Americans, going to China, coordinating with China. And we know they have a good relationship with Saudi Arabia in the region, with Turkey. That's a key country right now, in my opinion.
Right. I just read, we talked about it a little bit before we went on the air, but I just read a fairly good analysis, I think, by some people who were fed the information, if you will, from CIA, people who were willing to talk. And I was stunned by the procedures that they outlined that had gone on for the last few years since they ousted Imran Khan, and what that meant in terms of, it's typical Pakistani actions, but at the same time, it's not typical. When they ousted him, they put individuals into power in both the ISI and in the Pakistani military, some of them, as they do from time to time, overlapping to a certain extent. And they put someone in Khan's seat who is a lackey. And what's happening right now is all of these forces, according to this analysis, all of these forces are sort of vacillating as to where they're going at any given time. For example, one of the things that came out of this was the Chinese were told no on continuing something they'd already spent a considerable amount of money on, the port that they were going to have, not carte blanche, but almost carte blanche in, and was a very, very important part of their movement to the West, if you will. That got squelched, apparently, meaning that in this analysis's outcome, if you will, that Pakistan was moving again closer to the United States because we had put so much pressure on them to do that. And we had even been instrumental in getting rid of Khan. I believe that. Others have told me that. And putting in the people that are now in Pakistan in power. So then you get to the second part of the analysis and you're trying to figure out what they're talking about when they say, but then it's back to China again, and how China is still very influential in Islamabad for obvious reasons, money and everything else, and decisions on the part of the civilian government as well as the military. So where are they? At the end of the analysis, I'm asking myself, where are they in these negotiations? And I don't know if Larry wants to reveal it or not, but we talked about something else before we went on the air that seems like it would spin out of this if their decision is that they're really solid with China, that it ain't going to be a bifurcated foreign policy anymore, which is what they've been trying, according to this analysis, to maintain. A little bit here for the U.S., a little bit here for China. Let each of them think that everything or most of it is going to them and nothing is going to the other, and vice versa. Well, that's a dangerous game to play, very dangerous game to play, and especially with this administration. Some of the things they attributed to Marco Rubio saying about this inside channels indicated that maybe State Department at least was aware of the ambivalence going on in Islamabad right now. But my question to myself was, what the hell does this mean with regard to these negotiations? Does it mean, as the analysis also said, Rubio had concluded that the Pakistanis were duplicitous and he wasn't going to pay any attention to them? Or does it mean that Trump said that? Does it mean we don't trust them at all? And then the question is, why are we letting them be intermediaries and acting like we trust them? All coming back to the realization, I think, that this diplomacy is a farce. It's a farce. Whether you're telling Oman off or you're using Pakistan, it's a farce. We're not doing any diplomacy. All we're doing is trying to look like we're winning a war that we're losing. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to do so.
Yeah. Let me just point out that after Iran fired, so that took place, I guess, early Thursday morning, Iran time, which was like Wednesday night my time. But after they fired that missile at the U.S. Air Base in Kuwait, I'm told that the Supreme National Security Council met and came up with a new policy that was later on Thursday. President Pezeshkian had an hour and 47-minute conversation with Pakistani Prime Minister Sharif. And in that conversation, I'm not at liberty really to divulge all of that, but it dealt with what Iran's policy vis-a-vis nuclear weapons and the nuclear world would be going forward. Later that day, so this was yesterday, the Pakistani foreign minister Ishaq Dar communicated all that to Marco Rubio. And again, without going into the details yet, because the source is asked to hold back on this, it's the kind of information that after getting it, Marco Rubio would have needed an underwear change, okay? he might have defecated upon himself.
But it would prove the one conclusion that this analysis offered, that Marco Rubio doesn't trust the Pakistanis any further than he can spit.
Right. So that's why the White House, up until this just latest tweet we talked about a little bit ago or this Truth Social post by Trump, why they've been strangely quiet for about 24 hours because of the seriousness of this message. Now, the assumption that was expressed by Stephen Miller that Iran is in a desperate situation economically, that it's untenable, is simply not true. And Iran, I would argue, actually has better economic prospects right now than it did 3 months ago before the start of this war. For example, its trade with Russia and China has increased, not diminished. It's got more cash flow coming in because of the price of oil going up. And the attack by the United States and Israel on Iran on February 28th really galvanized China and Russia to say, okay, we got to step up our game in supporting Iran beyond what we had done previously. Trump is trying to figure out. Well, I'm not sure Trump is conscious about this, but that the people around Trump are trying to say, how the hell do we get out of this mess? Because we are caught right now. We don't have any good military options, despite all the chest thumping we're doing.
Yeah, Carl, I think when it comes to the conflict in the Middle East, the war between Iran and the United States, the most important comments coming from Israelis, mostly Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that we must complete the mission in Iran in a way that constitutes a final solution. A final solution. The message. Yeah.
Not a good use of language, by the way.
Yeah.
But he's very guarded about that. So when he does say something like that, beware. I mean, he doesn't use these terms loosely. Sometimes he uses them for what you might call deterrent impact, but sometimes he means what he's saying when he says it. And what he's doing in Lebanon right now, unconscionable. It's beginning to look like another Gaza. Haaretz this morning called it, it didn't call it a genocide yet, it called it ethnic cleansing. That's a pretty strong phrase for them to be using. And I think they're right. Where's he going to stop? Is he going to stop like he did in 1982 because he's getting his ass handed to him by the other side? Maybe, I don't know. But where is he going to stop if he's not? Where's he going to stop if he's got a little power left? And what does it mean with regard to his concentration on, should Trump decide to go back to war with Iran? Does he move all of his forces, or those forces that be necessary, principally the IAF? Does he move them over to join Trump in a week or two of resume bombing of Iran? Or does he continue what he's doing in Lebanon? Without the IAF, he's somewhat limited, because that's the only thing really that's saving him from a really domineering Hezbollah with regard to his tanks and other elements of the ground forces, who are being roundly beaten, battle after battle, incident after incident, I should be saying. I don't know where we go here in terms of the theaters that he's involved in terms of this morning, Haaretz said he's got 51 now. I think that's the postulation. So he's got a majority if the election were to occur right now. And they're talking about other people than Naftali Bennett and Lapid and others that were, shall we say, in the running, Gant, Benny Gant, maybe. They're talking about other people now in possible competition with Netanyahu, which means things are opening up a little bit on the political scene in Israel. What does all this mean in terms of what you just said? Remember when I was quoting that he said it in Hebrew amongst his select few, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and others, when he said they will get a surprise that they're not expecting. That and the final solution sort of reflects the same thing.
Yeah.
Larry, here is what Jonathan Pollard said, the Israeli spy, about the use of nukes. Here is what it said.
Yeah. Traitor
the
Pollard.
West, nuclear weapons at any level, tactical, strategic, EMPs, whatever, are viewed as something that should only be used as a last resort. And even then, very carefully, on an escalation ladder, as they say. With me, I don't care if you start throwing nukes immediately, responsibly, but immediately. And a case that I've been pushing is the use of an electromagnetic pulse weapon or weapons against Iran. Why are we waiting to get hit?
How do you use a nuclear weapon initially responsibly?
Yeah.
That's the question of the day.
I mean, look at Pollard. He looks like Jabba the Hutt with a beard. Okay. I mean, there's just, he is, just an unconscionable, despicable human being. And, to cavalierly discuss the use of a nuclear weapon, again, for what, to what end, to what purpose? Just having a big explosion somewhere doesn't, Israel, even with all of its nukes, it does not have the ability to wipe Iran off the face of the earth. And Iran has made it very clear, any such attack will be retaliated with on a massive scale. That Iran has. So it's, this is not a recipe for peace. This is a recipe for utter destruction. And the likely result would be the utter destruction of Israel. So we can call that the silver lining. But to get there, it would just it enters into a dimension of horror that someone like Pollard can just talk about it so cavalierly. This is a consequential week, and what's taking place at the White House right now, they're trying to press. They think they have the leverage to coerce Israel or coerce Iran into a deal. But Iran's sitting there and they're watching now what Israel is doing. Israel has they've broken the ceasefire. Yeah. I mean, the ceasefire was predicated upon stopping the attacks in Lebanon, particularly in Beirut. They're attacking Beirut now. Yep. And Iran's made it clear, if you do that, we're going to start retaliating. So I think, I think the odds are quite high that this war is going to reignite, and there's going to be a far greater destruction, both for the Israelis and for U.S. military presence in the area. Yeah, Iran's going to suffer too. I don't want to minimize that at all. But, I had to go back and look it up. The dynamics with the Gulf Arabs, they're not a united front. I mean, it's almost like a reality TV show in which all they're locked into a house and they all hate each other. So, 9 years ago, you had Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates all pissed off at Qatar because Qatar had its relationship with Turkey, and Qatar was also supplying support to Hamas or Hezbollah, and the Saudis and the UAE said, by God, we're not going to allow that to happen. And the one country that came to Qatar's aid was Iran. So here's Iran, who'd built up this positive relationship. And then over the last during this last year, you had Saudi Arabia and UAE pissing on each other. So like I said, there's no common. The Gulf Arabs don't have some common bond that draws them together, and this is where the role of Pakistan and China come into play, because in China in particular, with its economic power, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, they all want to do business with China because they recognize China is the future. The United States is not the future. China is. And so China wields some enormous influence on that. So I think there are some dynamics underway here that are outside of the control of the United States, particularly on the economic front.
Yeah. Carl, Larry said that the war would be devastating for Iran, and many people know that in Iran. They're talking every day, every minute, they're talking about how this war has been devastating for Iran so far and what would be the consequences of the continuation of the war. But the main point on their side is, what else do we have?
Well, exactly. And I make Larry's point even stronger if I can. If you apply the final solution, if the final solution for Bibi Netanyahu is use of nuclear weapons, you are not going to do anything more to defeat Iran. You're just going to make them more resolute, and you're going to make them unleash everything they have on everybody in sight. So this is not something they should be contemplating from the very practical point of view. They do not have the power to do it. They think they do. And people with nuclear weapons generally tend to think that way. Take the North Koreans, for example. They do have an inventory of weapons, but it's a deterrent. That's about it. If they were to unleash every one of those weapons on South Korea, they would be ultimately defeated. There's no doubt in my mind about that. The question is it worth that kind of destruction and that kind of ignominy to do that? Because you're going to disappear. There'd be no question about the reunification of the peninsula at that point. So all to say, nuclear weapons are not a game ender necessarily, unless they're possessed in the types, models, missiles, and so forth, and the huge capacity for destruction of the whole planet that we in Russia possess. Now that is a very, very dangerous accumulation of weapons, world ending if they were all used. But I don't want to make light of nuclear weapons, certainly, but it's not something that Bibi ought to be counting on being something that will end everything and in his favor, because it won't. It'll make an even worse pariah of him than he already is. When you look at these people, you look at the people around him like Lapid and Naftali Bennett, and even some of the ones who pretend to be a little more less draconian. They really are all cut from the same cloth. They came from the same cloth the Nazis came from, the same cloth Hitler came from. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And if you look at what they're doing and what we're helping them to do to international law, which no longer really exists, just our attacks on the high seas, killing now over 200 people, as I understand it, without due process, have killed international law. So we've murdered whatever we put in place after World War II with reasonably good intentions. We've murdered it. It no longer exists. How much further do you want to go to degrade the world? And I haven't even started talking about Z and what he's doing in Ukraine and what the Russians have threatened to do with response to that. We're looking at a conflict that could spread like a wildfire really quickly. And we're looking at, as Larry just said, the real power being on the other side.
Larry, do you see the problem physically I'm talking about is in the United States or is out of the United States, basically in Israel? The problem with Donald Trump, and then because we know that he's desperate. He wants to get out of this war. But what would be the main obstacle? That obstacle is in the United States. I'm talking about the people who are supporting Israel, or Israel itself is the main obstacle.
Let me offer one thing before you go, Larry. And I'm only offering this because Josh Paul had just sent me the latest. He's got an anti-AIPAC pact going, And he just sent me the latest analysis that they've done of this move in the Congress in the NDAA, just to show you how much we have not defeated this relationship. The Congress is moving in the NDAA for 27, the defense budget for 27. They're moving to mask all the arms sales to Israel, take it out of the State Department process, take it out of the foreign policy process, and put it strictly under DOD without any oversight whatsoever. I know about this because Rumsfeld tried to do this in a narrow way. That tells you we are still connected lock, stock, and barrel to Israel. That means there'll be no visibility for arms sales. We will be in the most unique relationship we've ever been with any country with regard to arms sales. We'll be the same. Lockheed Martin will be working for Israel and Israel for Lockheed Martin, and so on.
Yeah, what he said. Well, yeah, look, the primary pressure on Trump is it is being channeled through the domestic Zionists, both Jewish and Christian, and you're getting it through the likes of Lindsey Graham, even Richard Blumenthal on the Senate side. The money side, you got Miriam Adelson, you got Bill Ackman. So you've got all of this pressure on Trump from and from the neoconservatives too. They're not relenting. But what they're up against now is the mask. AIPAC. In the past, if you tried to argue as Mearsheimer and as John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt did in their book, that the AIPAC exerted all this enormous influence, and they were attacked and to attempt to ostracize them. No, that's not true. That's a conspiracy theory. Well, that whole conspiracy theory got ripped apart with what was done to Thomas Massie. They didn't mask it at all. They tried, and they got exposed. So the turn against Israel among the under 50 crowd in particular, but I'd say even people that are the age of Colonel Wilkerson and myself, there's a growing number of us that are just saying this is a toxic relationship and it has to end. And so Israel will continue to score some of these Pyrrhic victories for right now, but I think the direction we're heading is that the United States will be in a position where it's no longer going to be committed to the complete defense of Israel, and Israel is going to be. I question how long it can survive under the strain that it's facing, because it does not have unlimited military resources, and so they can bomb the hell out of Lebanon, but what they're trying to do on the ground, Hezbollah is lighting them up every day with these drones. Israel already has suffered. They're suppressing their casualties. They're suppressing the number of killed and wounded, but even the number that have been publicly reported exceeds the number that were wounded in the 2006 invasion into southern Lebanon. So they're already suffering more casualties on that front. They've tamped down. They try to pretend that there's just only a couple of dozen killed in action. Nonsense. The number of these drone strikes, you see them over and over, and they're hitting the back of these vehicles, hitting tanks. They took out an Iron Dome the other day. So this illustrates it. So Israel cannot sustain this kind of loss. They're too small a country, and they don't have the economic basis to do it. Is this the one where you see the guys scrambling? Yeah, they're scrambling out, jumping out the back, and you got at least two that were still caught in there, two or more. So, this is nothing. Israel's never faced anything like this, and they obviously have learned no lessons from the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
There may be no state of Israel as we presently know it left to share, defend, or sell arms to.
Yeah.
Colonel, yesterday one of the Israeli commanders said that it was when this whole game of drones started, we thought it's a technical issue for Israel. Right now, with the use of drones and the way they're using these drones against air defense system, communication system, soldiers, and it's becoming a strategic problem for Israel because for the time being, they have no solution for that.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm being told I won't say strategic, but it has strategic implications, but certainly the operational tactical reason that he said, go. Don't stop at the next river. Don't stop at Beirut. Go. Go until you've rooted them all out, and you ain't going to do that. You know, when you go like that and you have a mission of rooting them all out, they just fall in behind you. They go around your flanks and fall in behind you and do it to you again from the rear. I mean, this is untenable. And it's going to turn out like it did in 82 when we essentially had to go in and bail them out and got ourselves into a real mess. Had Battleship New Jersey in the Eastern Med hurling 16-inch rounds into the hills. You know, just stupid, dumb. But we created that situation on behalf of Israel because we had to pull their ass out.
And let's recall that as a consequence of that intervention, the U.S. Embassy was blown up in Beirut.
Yep.
And then the Marine, they call it the Marine Barracks, but the location where the U.S. Marines and French Marines were based, they both took some significant hits. 241 dead Marines. So yeah, this is, and when Reagan agreed to that, apparently I'm told that Cap Weinberger just was livid. He was not consulted.
One Marine told me that day, 243, I think, Marines and 2 Navy corpsmen, that day was equal to the first 4 hours on Tarawa.
Mm-hmm.
So, hell of a casualty rate.
Larry, today I talked with Ambassador Chas Freeman. You were talking about how Israel is trying to see the whole region. And when it comes to this guy, Israeli spy, American-born Israeli spy, Jonathan Pollard, he said that the question right now for Israel is the next round of the fight, which is against Turkey and Egypt. And this guy, as Ambassador Chas Freeman mentioned, is representing majority of the people in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have to hear these people. How do they feel? How they think? How they see the situation? And here is what he said.
We don't think geostrategically. Forget about Jolani. Forget about Donald Trump. I am principally worried, first of all, for the welfare of our Druze brothers across the border, but secondarily, if Jolani and his Islamists actually reoccupy that area,
they will.
We will have the Turks. We will have the Turks right on our border.
We eventually will,
and I'm not so sure that we will have as easy a time with the Turks as we've had with the Iranians. I've been following Turkish military doctrine, and
the strongest army in the Middle East.
The storm is coming.
Yes, of course. And they're a member of NATO.
And even worse, they're a member of NATO. So I look at Iran as a problem we absolutely have to finish, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Gaza, same thing, and the Hezbollah. Why am I fixated on this now? Because we have to be prepared for the next war, which will be probably against Turkey and Egypt. So
let's hope not.
I hope not also, but we, hope, you remember, it was the last demon out of Pandora's box. And there's a reason for that.
In Israel, to be a pontificator like that, do you have to be a Tubbalard?
Yeah.
I mean, Job of the Hutt.
With a beard.
Yeah, with a beard.
No, I mean, this is a level of lunacy, that is difficult to describe in words. Yeah, I mean, we sit there and watch this and think, he's just an aberration. Unfortunately, he's not.
No.
And for him to sit there and think that Israel can fight, engage in a war with Turkey, I mean, the Turkish army is, de jure, the second largest army in NATO. I say de jure. De facto, it was Ukraine. Ukraine had the second largest army, but wasn't an official member of NATO. But the Turks, the Turks are actually, unlike the Israeli defense forces, the Turks are actually competent, and they have a professional army. The Israelis do not have a professional army. They are largely a reservist group, and the lack of leadership, the lack of adequate command and control, the lack of training, they're just they're more like a marauding band of thugs, and it's been reflected in how they operate in the field. So for him to sit there, and I don't think he's again some outlier. It is a reminder to people that even if Bibi Netanyahu goes, the threat that Israel poses to the region remains. And it's going to remain as long as the Zionists are in control. And that's why, what Iran's calling for the destruction of that version of Israel, a Zionist version of Israel that is an ethno-supremacist state. And it is almost, it's along the same lines as what Nazi Germany was. Because, when the Nazis passed the Nuremberg laws, those Nuremberg laws were identifying, basically punishing a group of people for their, genetic identity. And Israel is engaged in sort of the same phenomena. They mask it a little bit with, as long as you are, quote, Jewish, but even if you're born Jewish and convert to Christianity, then you're excluded. But again, it's this ethno identity that punishes, that rewards certain groups of people and punishes others. And that is, as long as that exists, that's going to be a toxic effect upon world peace.
Yeah. Yesterday, on a podcast, Nima, I suggested to my interviewer that Turkey might be a element in this if Netanyahu goes too far north. And I got these looks of total disbelief. You don't think that would really happen, do you? I said, not only do I think that might happen, I would hit them in the rear if I were Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
I would coordinate with Ankara and I would hit them in the rear. And I'd ask Baghdad if they wanted to come along for the ride, because never will this state of Israel, as polluted and, as Larry has described well, foul as it is, been more vulnerable. And if you want to get rid of it, and you want to get rid of it decisively, that would be a perfect way to do it.
But necessarily that doesn't the way that Benjamin Netanyahu feels about Israel. He says Israel is no longer merely a regional power. It's already a global power.
Yeah.
I don't know in what sense he's feeling that way. In
the sense that he's tucked into
so far.
He's tucked into a fading empire, but nonetheless an empire. That's why he can feel that way. That's why he can say those things. And I actually think he was smart enough to be, before we got really deeply buried in this last aspect of this struggle, he was going around to other capitals, checking out whether or not he would be able to shift his flag when the time came that the empire the other way was fading so fast that he no longer wanted to be a part of it. The man's not stupid. He's not stupid. You go back and look at his trips around the world at a time of some criticality, and yet he was going to these other places ostensibly to seek their help with his current struggles. But what he was doing in part was looking for new campgrounds, new places, new super daddies. because they can't do it by themselves. I mean, they may have aspirations to eventually be able to be, the new empire in the world and have it be Jewish. But I think that's a long way away, even if it were achievable. And he's got to have a lot of help along the way. So he's very shrewd about looking for new help, just as Mohammed bin Salman is in Riyadh. This whole region has got to either change dramatically and become more or less self-sufficient. That is to say, get rid of the potentates and let the people begin to have something to say about their government. Or it's got to find a new daddy to protect them in their current configuration. Because we are done.
Larry, what else the GCC countries can do? Because they feel a lot of pain right now. They don't know what to do. Even that country called Oman, which has nothing to do with anything that is happening in the Middle East, in the West Asia. There's Donald Trump yesterday said he's going to blow them up. And just think of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other countries in that region who desperately need the Strait of Hormuz to be opened up. And they're not getting it as we talk about it anytime soon.
Well, the reference I made to this Art Berman earlier, one other fact that he brought out that I had not heard, but I don't think he was making it up, is one of the there are firms out there that do analysis about what's actually happening to oil. And even if the Strait of Hormuz is reopened today, and everything starts flowing, there 700,000 barrels of oil are no longer available. The damage that's been done to wells and to will make it basically impossible to recover anytime soon. So the world is going to be dealing with a substantial loss of a significant supply of oil that's critical for things like diesel. So this is the thing that there is no unity among the Gulf Cooperating Council. On paper, yes, but in reality, no. So what are their options? And this is where both Saudi Arabia and Qatar appear to be acting jointly, or at least the unifying point is China. They are denying the U.S. Use of military facilities in their country. Qatar, I am told, has informed the United States that basically you got to shut down Al Udeid within the next 9 months. So they're moving toward the point of that if that's true, that is a huge loss for the United States, because that's been the center for U.S. military operations in the Persian Gulf region for at least 25 years. And that's where you had the Combined Air Operations Center, the CAOC, operating. And we do have recent evidence that the Saudis did impose some limits on U.S. Air refueling operations in its territory. So if all of that is true, that the Saudis and Qataris have decided, the future does not lie with the United States. The future lies with China and with Pakistan, because notice the security relationship between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia has increased over the last. And I'm told that one of the guarantees that the Pax gave was a guarantee that there's a nuclear umbrella over Saudi Arabia now, thanks to Pakistan.
Larry, Colonel, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of alliance, partnership among the countries in the Middle East. I'm talking about Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and since Pakistan is protecting Saudi Arabia would be part of that. And Qatar definitely would be part of that. And it's all about the Israeli behavior, because they have to do something about it. They cannot continue with this sort of insanity that is going on in the West Asia. And each and everybody is getting hit by this war. It's not just about Iran and GCC countries.
I think people like Erdogan and probably others were thinking that the United States would come to its senses at some point, that we would have better policies and better actions emanating from Washington. They are now convinced that not only are they not going to get that change, it's going to get worse. So you're right, they've got to start thinking. And it takes me back to the period, some of it was happening prior to 1914, for example, but it happens throughout history with empires. Secret treaties are made. Codicils are decided in secret, and no one else knows about them except through their intelligence means, which sometimes discovers them, sometimes doesn't, sometimes makes them more powerful than they really are, and the opposite. So we're entering a period like that, I think, in this great struggle between the power in the East, which is taking over, and the power in the West, which is going away, where there are probably going to be codicils and treaties like that again, that we won't know anything about until the bombs start falling, so to speak. And you're describing some of those that might result. And the unique thing, and well, not unique, but the dangerous thing in the past with these sorts of treaties and secret agreements is that they're often made with two different powers, or in two different directions, policy-wise. And you decide at the last minute which one you're going to honor. That makes it even more complicated for people to sort things out. And that's what builds into things like World War I and World War II. And we've got a recipe for that right now. And it's written all across the face of Europe, from the Arctic down to the Antarctic. And it's written fairly vividly for some powers. And everybody's going to start picking and choosing sides. And the traditional alliances are passé. And yet you hear Brussels yesterday talking as if everything is the same. And this drone that went to Romania indicates that we're going to have to fight Russia, and everybody better get ready to do so. What are they smoking? And the Polish guy too, what's he smoking?
Yeah.
I mean, dude, don't you know where you are? And don't you know what your history reflects? But this is what you get.
Larry, what is your understanding of this drone going to Romania? It was a Russian drone going there, and what was the message if that was the case?
Well, I don't think it was a deliberate attack by Russia. If anything, it could have been a mistake. It also could have been a false flag.
Yeah, Z.
Yeah, to make it appear that it was Russia. The reason I say it is Russia would have a reason to attack Constanta. I think that's Constanta in Romania, which is the area where they're building up a major NATO base. So yes, I could see Russia potentially attacking that location. But if they're going to attack it, they're not going to do it with one damn drone. Okay. I mean, they're going to go in with the Kinshals, the Iskanders, maybe the Oreshnik. So they're going to go and hit it and take it out. So this strikes me as more of a false flag effort, because immediately the Romanian government declared persona non grata the consul general. So there was a Russian consulate there. They haven't broken off relationships fully with Russia. The Russian ambassador remains in Bucharest, but this is deliberately trying to up the tensions between Europe and Russia. They didn't listen to a damn word that Sergei Lavrov said this week. And so the old expression, fuck around, find out. They're going. Romania's headed down the road of FAFO.
And we got a NATO contingent up there in Finland exercising right now in an area that swallowed the Russian army. It's just, I don't know. Every time I listen to the NATO Secretary General, I think, God, I wish Jens Stoltenberg were back. And yet he was just as bad.
Yeah.
Colonel, today Sergei Shoigu at the International Security Forum, he said, confirmed the warning to ambassadors to leave Kiev. It seems something big gonna happen in Kiev because there's just, we had the phone call between Lavrov and Rubio. He warned Marco Rubio, and Shoigu is just repeating the same message. And Ukrainians, we had the report on the part of Ukrainian telling us that maybe something big is going to happen in Ukraine.
I think this is a non-combatant evacuation operation Russian style. In other words, they're sending the message, you better, otherwise you may die. And I think they're serious. And I've been told that their target is probably going to be that cell that includes us. Their primary target, the one that's giving the intelligence or helping with the technical aspects of deep strikes into Russia and storm shadows and things like that. They know where it is. I expect they've known where it is for a long time. Maybe they're going to hit some other assets, maybe in Ukraine only, but other assets that are manned by the Brits, us, others. I'm sure the Israelis are there too. So we're off to the races.
Is Trump taking these messages seriously, these warnings?
I was told that, I don't know how accurate this is, but I was told by one person that Rubio was furious. And, what does fury mean? You better evacuate. I mean, you better take them at their word, and you better evacuate if you want to save any of these people.
Yeah, no, it marks a decided shift in the Russian strategy. We haven't actually seen it executed yet, but and looking at history, Russia doesn't make these threats idly. When they say something, pay attention to what they're saying. They are not accustomed to blowing smoke up people's skirts.
I can hear someone like Steve Miller when he's apprised of it, or maybe even Rubio saying, well, if we evacuate, we'll have acted to the threat. They won't really strike us. Well, tell their widows that when it happens.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Colonel and Larry, for being with us today.
We have breaking news. President Trump just moments ago put out on Truth Social that he is meeting in the Situation Room 2. As he said here at the bottom of the screen, we'll roll down and see. I will be meeting now in the Situation Room to make a final determination of what is going to happen with the Iran war. He's been saying for quite a long time that we've had a deal that we've been talking since, I think, a week ago. Last Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, when he says we have largely agreed to this deal. We'll be announcing the details soon. Now here we are about a week later. There still has been no details. A lot of conflicting information, which we're going to get to in a minute. But now President Trump is claiming that he is in the Situation Room to make a final determination. Now, one can only imagine he didn't specify, but the implication being that it's either going to be a negotiated deal on the terms he laid out in that Truth Social, or he's going to be returning back to military operations. That's the implication being it. I don't know what else the final determination is going to be unless he's been watching our show and says, you know what, I've calculated that the best thing is to do the walkaway plan. And so if Iran doesn't agree to my negotiated terms, we'll just walk away. That would be better than doing the insane and catastrophic and self-destructive going back to military terms and listening to all the war hawks who are begging him for that, not the least of which are in Tel Aviv, Israel. But let's get to what he said here, because this is really, really important and kind of illustrates a couple of big things that we're going to talk about in this show today, and that is trust. Number one, if you don't have trust, it's some modicum of trust, even if you hate your painful enemy, you still have to have some level of trust if you want a negotiated outcome, because the other side has to believe that you'll do what you say so that they'll give you what you want, and that you have to have trust that they'll do what they say. If there's not at least a modicum of trust, then there is no foundation for any kind of a negotiated settlement. Now, Iran is all the time in Western media accused of always breaking their word, never doing what they say. Well, the actual record is mixed on that. There have been some things they have not done, but there have been a whole slew of things that they have done. And when they had been, especially during the JCPOA period, when it was identified and they were exposed to things they weren't doing, then they brought them into compliance. So they have some degree there. So there is some modicum of trust on that side that they'll do what they say, especially as long as we have some motivation for them to keep doing it. The question is there any trust on our side of the ledger so that Iran can agree to the terms that President Trump wants? That is the operative thing here. Let's take a look at some of the details here from this Truth Social. President Trump starts off by saying Iran must agree that they will never have a nuclear weapon or bomb, which is obvious because they have always said that. They have never said anything beside that. So check, that's done. The Hormuz Strait must be immediately open, no tolls, or for unrestricted shipping in both directions. All water mines, bombs, if any, will be terminated. This goes into a lot of details about the mines. Then we roll down to the bottom part here. Then he says that the so-called nuclear dust reprocessed material is going to have to be unearthed by the United States, which it is agreed is the only country, along with China, with mechanical capability of doing so in close coordination and conjunction with the Islamic Republic of Iran, plus the Atomic Energy Agency, and destroyed. No money will be exchanged until further notice. Other items of far less importance have been agreed to. So here's President Trump there, just right off the bat, saying, listen, we have, in close coordination with Iran, agreed to all these things, some lesser issues and some more important issues. And he keeps talking about how they're going to do with the nuclear dust, with opening the Strait of Hormuz, no tolls, no fees, just completely open. And that he said some other issues. Probably he's talking about support for the proxies, the long-range missiles, the Lebanon issue, which are far from minor issues, but he just relegates those to the side. But even the ones that he mentions there are very, very different than what the Iranian side has been saying, even in the past week or so. Now, Jeremy Scahill, just moments ago, published this on X, where he's talking about that the Iranian side had suspected something like this would happen. I think he posted something on this partially last night, and then again today. He said, this is what an Iranian official, this is, let's see, this is 11:20, so literally just minutes ago. This is what an Iranian official told me last night, anticipating Trump would be making such an announcement like the one he just made on Truth Social. Iran has also warned Trump would likely mischaracterize the private agreement terms to promote his victory narrative. And from last night, he was talking about, Iranian official tells me that Iran's perspective, there is a final draft of an MOU with the U.S., but Iran has zero trust. There is that word we're going to use again, in trust, or the U.S. word, and can't rule out the chance of more U.S.-Israeli strikes. Therefore, Iran is proceeding cautiously on any official announcement. And listen, let's get into this whole issue. We're going to show you in a minute. Actually, no, let me do it right now because it really highlights. So you just saw what President Trump has said here. This issue that they're going to have a nuclear weapon. Strait of Hormuz must be immediately open. No tolls, unrestricted shipping. That the nuclear dust has to be destroyed, with the United States doing it, and no money will be agreed to. Those three things. Remember those. Let me show you something that Professor Morandi, who was part of the first delegation, the Iranian delegation at the negotiations with the United States, so he's very well tied in with what the official government points are. He told me just a few days ago that there are 4 non-negotiables that Iran must have in order to have a negotiated settlement. See how that lines up with what I just told you from Trump's Truth Social. From the Iranian perspective, for this war to come to an end and for the dueling blockades to leave and to have any chance of a resumption of the flow of oil to even approximate what it was before this war started, Iran's going to have unfrozen assets that's their money freed up.
The sanctions have to be waived for the energy sector, not all sanctions, just the energy sector.
Okay, so the sanctions on the energy sector, an end of war negotiated terms of some sort, some kind of an agreement on that, and a stoppage of the war in Hezbollah, against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So if all four of those things happen, then the Iranian side will agree to. But, and let me not mischaracterize, if any of those four things don't happen, then there won't be an end. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's right. And of course, the siege on the Strait of Hormuz, I'm not sure if you said that or not. But yes, you're absolutely correct.
So there you have it, that the Iranians will maintain the control of the Strait of Hormuz, that there will be money from their frozen assets, Iranian money will be released up front, and that the sanctions on the energy sector will be released up front. Those are some of the key things. And when he says the ceasefire, he went on to explain that it has to, the war has to come to an end. That was specifically talking about Lebanon. And of course, the Israeli press this morning is talking about how the Israelis are saying, and not saying, they have pushed even beyond the Litani River, which used to be the northernmost limit of advance. Now they are pushing beyond that, which seems to be a direct affront to President Trump. Any idea? Everybody knows it's very clearly articulated by the Iranian side that the war against Lebanon must come to an end as part of an agreement. Here, it's one and the same. And so the Iranian side, the Israeli side, is clearly not wanting that to happen. So they are pushing even deeper into Lebanon, which is very similar to what they did when Trump first announced on, I think it was the 7th or 8th of April, the ceasefire from the first 40 some odd days of war, which was also had to include Lebanon, and Israel hit Lebanon with the biggest strike in its history that morning. So this is something that Israel has done before. All of that goes to say, where is there any trust that President Trump will will accomplish and conduct anything that he says? This is absolutely crucial. This is not a minor issue, folks. If the other side doesn't have any confidence that whatever terms could be agreed to in a memorandum of understanding, even that, forget about the actual end of war negotiation, which even according to these renderings would be 60 some odd days later, where all the hard issues would be met. But if you can't have a modicum of trust, you can't even have a memorandum go into effect if the other side doesn't believe you're gonna abide by it. Now, let's just take a look at this. Of course, as we talk about a lot on the show, there's probably the biggest issues was during the 2025 war when we were in the middle of negotiations. We said we were trying to find a way out, and then we bombed them. And then during this war, we're three sessions in. The third session proved out a foundation for a tremendous deal for the Trump administration, better than the Obama, et cetera. And then we bombed them again. So if we only talked about those two things, then there would already be saying, where is the basis for any trust? But that's not the end of the story. I'm going to show you here just a compilation of a number of things. Now, I'm sorry, this may be pretty small on some of your screens here. I'll read it out loud here, but this just shows you this is a limited number. This is definitely not all of the time President Trump has said since the war started, various statements on what he was going to do or what represented reality. First of all, on March 1st, so basically the second day of the war, he declared, "We've already won, but I want to win by a bigger margin." On the 7th of March, the war is actually a minor excursion because remember, there was a lot of thought that he's going to be able to win this war in 3 or 4 days because of the decapitation, because of this crushing of everything else. He thought it was going to be something like the Maduro deal. So he thought 3 or 4 days we're going to win it. Now here on the 7th, we're on the day 8 of the war. And he said, well, it's just a minor excursion. Then they ran into issue that it turned out, well, it's actually not a war because, well, that's got 1973 War Powers Resolutions requirements on top of it. So actually, this isn't a war. It's just an excursion. On the 11th of March, President Trump said the U.S. won the war in Iran in the, quote, first hour on the 11th of March. On the 12th of March, there's nothing left to target, Trump said, so it's basically already won. On the 17th of March, war was over in 2 or 3 days. So first it was the first hour, now it was in 2 or 3 days. On the 18th day of the war, he said again, it was already won. On the 20th of March, oh, I think we won. 3 days later, on the 24th of March, we won this war, he told reporters. This war has been won. Let me take a pause in a moment here. these things, we're talking at the moment about whether we can have a negotiated settlement with Iran. But listen, folks, the primary target of deception in these is you. This is in American press. This is what President Trump is trying to convince the people, that what they see with their eyes is not actually real. Listen to the words coming out of his mouth and reading the words off of his Truth Social. That's where you need to put your trust, not in what's real or what you can see, touch, and observe. But you're the target of this deception. Understand that. We continue on. On the 7th of April, that's when he announced the ceasefire. So, all right, so we're going to do a 2-week ceasefire, and then everything is going to be good to go. We're going to come to a negotiated settlement. Then a week later, on the 15th of April, he said the war will be over very soon. On the 17th of April, on Truth Social, he said, on Truth Social, he wrote, just announced that the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. Remember that? We spent a lot of time on that on the show at that time. And there was supposed to be a joint agreement that we're going to have, that the 2-week ceasefire was going to be expanded into a longer term, and that both the dueling blockades were going to be lifted. So nearly simultaneously, the Iranian side, through I think it was Abbas Araghchi, said, yes, the strait is now fully open. And then Trump followed that up shortly on Truth Social by saying, yep, it's fully open, but he also added, our blockade will remain. The Iranian side blockade is completely open. So whatever was agreed to behind the scenes, that they were both supposed to jointly announce that the blockades had been lifted and that they were going to negotiate while the flow of oil could go out, Trump undercut it, pulled the rug out from under it, and said, no, it's not. And then, of course, Iran hours later says, then neither is ours, since you didn't listen to your words. So that is crucial. So President Trump is not just lying to you, he's also lying to our adversaries and deepening the mistrust that there is. And again, don't miss this, friends. If you want your enemy, somebody that you hate, somebody that you're at war with, if you want them to stop doing things that are harmful to you, i.e. controlling the Strait of Hormuz and blocking the oil, blocking the fertilizer, the helium, the aluminum, the sulfur, all kinds of things that we need to get out, natural gas, they have to believe that you'll do what you say. Otherwise, we have what we have right now, that they're not listening to you, they're not believing you, and they're keeping that thing closed to our harm. That's where this is going. I continue on. On the 1st of May, Trump told Congress that hostilities had been terminated. So basically, war's over, everything's good to go. But it wasn't. That didn't happen. The war wasn't open. He just claimed it, but nothing happened. On May 23rd, Trump announced that an agreement with Iran had been largely negotiated. So here he's telling everybody again, with Iran, we have largely agreed with everything. Terms will be coming out later today, he subsequently said. Obviously, they didn't. That was on the 23rd. This is the 29th, 6 days later. Where are the terms? Where is anything from the Iranian side? The Iranian side has consistently said, I don't know what he's talking about. Here's our terms. And that's very different from the terms he said in the past or what I just showed you moments ago. Then we get down to May 24th. Trump said the U.S. was close to finalizing a memorandum of understanding to permanently end the war and reopen the straits. Close to finalizing an MOU. Have we been close to finalizing an MOU? What do you think the Iranians are saying today? Now, if what President said was true on the 24th of May, if what President Trump said was true about 2 hours ago, I think it was actually less than that, 10:51. Yeah, sorry, it was 1 hour ago. If what President Trump said was 1 hour ago, we should expect that the Iranian side would be saying something close to the same thing. And that very soon the dueling blockades would be opened, the flow of oil, natural gas, and other derivatives would be fine, and we would start the process of unwinding all this damage. Let me show you what they are saying, however. This is Iran's statement today, who is the Speaker of their parliament and their chief negotiator. We seized concessions, not through dialogue, but with missiles. In negotiations, we merely make them understand. We have no trust in guarantees or words. Only actions are the measure. No action will be taken before the other side's acts. And what he's talking about there is because of the embarrassment that they had the last time when Abbas Araghchi released that statement about the strait being open when Trump undercut it. This time they said that's not going to happen anymore. We're not going to take any action until the other side acts. That also is referring to the money, because they've said, Professor Morandi said it on our show, they have said it at the government level. We will get money released from the frozen funds first. Now, remember, I've been showing you Trump has been undercutting himself by repeatedly having these childish things on his Truth Social, to where he shows all this Obama with all this cash going to Iran, and he has constantly mocked the former president and saying, oh yeah, he just gave this cash to Iran and all this kind of stuff, saying I'm not going to do that in this Truth Social. I think that he actually said that again here. He said that there won't be any cash, if I'm not mistaken. No cash will be exchanged. Okay, then you don't have a deal, because the other side says, because we can't trust you. And you see the Ghalibaf is saying it right here. No action will be taken until the other side acts. So until they see those funds lifted, and people are talking about $24 billion. Let's be clear on the scale here. Because as I understand it, I think the number was 1.7 billion that President Obama released. Again, he didn't give them anything. He released their funds that already belonged to them. So let's be honest about that too, because President Trump isn't. He always lies and said it also, and all of his supporters also lie and say we, quote, gave them cash. We did not. We allowed them to have access to their own money. That was always there. Well, now then that's the same thing that they're requiring here. We're going to get access to our own money, and you're going to release some of these. And I don't know what the number is. I think I've heard somewhere between 10 and $12 billion that they're going to require about half of it. So they say, unless we get half of it, we're not going to do anything. And they're going to have, as Professor Morandi said on our show 3 days ago, the sanctions relief on the energy infrastructure up front. Those sanctions have to be waived first. Then they will reciprocate. So that's where we are right now from what the Iranian side is saying. So I just showed you here that they are very, very adamant about this. They say we have no trust in the words and won't take any action before other sides. Then he adds this third point here. The winner of any agreement is the one who is better prepared for war from the day after. So they are clearly communicating that we would love this to be solved diplomatically. We're willing to do so, as we have been in the past, but because the rug has been pulled out from under us in the past, because you have lied to us during negotiations and struck us militarily in the process of doing it, we're not going to do anything further until we get something first. And if we don't get it first, we're prepared, as Moshe Rezai, who is the senior military advisor to the Supreme Leader, also said today, if the naval blockade continues beyond a certain time frame, we will break it and force America to end it through negotiation, or in case of resistance, through direct action. So they are literally stepping this up. Now then they're saying, hey, you either come up with some actions first and build some trust, and the Iranian side is willing to go down that path, or we're going to be prepared for military. And unlike what Ghalibaf, sorry, hit the wrong one. Unlike what Ghalibaf has said, listen, we're going to be prepared for war. But Moza Rezai, he says we're going to be prepared to take offensive action. Now, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is happening right now as we're talking in the Situation Room in the White House? What I hope is happening is that there are plenty of people there, senior ranking military, that is telling people there is no military solution, Mr. President, to solve this problem. The terms you put out on Truth Social are not acceptable to the other side. And if you use military power to try to compel them to do it, which of course Lindsey Graham wants, Mark Levin wants, Mike Pompeo wants, ad infinitum, Jack Keane, of course, some of the major ones, General Kellogg, they have been begging for that for the first time. They are all crazy. Either they're crazy or they just don't care about human life. They don't care about our economy. They just have this lust to try and hurt Iran some more. I don't know what it is. I can only speculate. What I can tell you authoritatively is that they are dead flat wrong. If President Trump listens to them and the other people who are advocating this, and one can only imagine some are coming from inside of Israel, you can figure out for yourself who that is. President Trump, if he listens to them and goes back and says, all right, we're going to start bombing, then he will cause the harm to our country to increase exponentially from where it is now. We've already been harmed a lot. I've been showing you a lot. I've shown you experts in here. I've shown you across the board. I'm talking like mainstream folks, like Exxon itself, many other big names throughout the energy infrastructure. They're all telling us lights are flashing red. The sirens are going off. We're literally weeks away from an edge because we're running out of petroleum storages to offset what's being shut down out of the strait. And it's going to be a huge, you can't walk this one back. You can't manipulate this one. You can't Truth Social this one or claim that we're about to have a deal to get the price to go artificially down, because the fundamentals are still what they are. Once we get to that point, it's going to be a crash and it's going to hurt us hard. If President Trump listens to those folks in the Situation Room right now, then that will be profoundly worse, because now it won't just be a political decision that right now can still be decided and the gates can open and it'll still be a long process, as we detailed for you in the past, but it'll at least start. But if he goes military, now that it's going to destroy a lot of this infrastructure, and it will be years with an S, years before this stuff, even after the war is completed, before we can get back to anything approximating the flow that we had on the 27th of February. Art Berman tells us we may not ever get back to that. There's some things no one knows. I don't know. He doesn't know. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, nobody knows, because a lot of they've had shut in. The same in the Iranian side. They've had a lot of shut in process. They have to shut down their pumps and their oil wells, and no one knows what's going to happen when they turn it back on. So all it's theory. We've never seen it, certainly at this scale. And it's unlikely that it's going to work all perfectly. You can imagine it's not going to. That's where we are right now. So the only thing that President Trump should do coming out of this is to change the terms that he just put out on Truth Social, and either change it to something that the Iranian side can live with and does some of these things, which of course will be politically impossible. Well, not impossible, very painful for him to do, or he can continue lying. And this is the one case where I would advocate that, and claim, okay, we destroyed them so much, the whole walk away plan. So it'll take them decades to rebuild, whatever. So we're going to take our toys and go home. And then that will get the flow back open again. The worst thing he can do is to listen to the war hawks. But right now, we are in such dangerous conditions because there is no trust in us. And listen, this extends beyond here. This is a major, fundamental, core problem with President Trump. I'm going to show you one other thing here before we let you go today, because you see that this is not just something endemic to the Middle East. This is in his character, and it has profound impact across the board on all kinds of foreign policy issues, on trade and other things too, but especially on war and peace issues. Here he is in 2023, telling very confidently, Fox News, how he's going to end the Russia-Ukraine war in a day.
Putin, like Ukraine a lot, it was the apple of his eye, but he never made a move with me because he knew he couldn't do it. Remember this also with Putin. You know, they like to say, oh, Trump was softer. I was tougher on Russia than anybody in history with the sanctions and everything else.
You said you could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I could.
How would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. I felt he was very honorable, because when they asked him about the perfect phone call that I made, he said it was indeed perfect. He said it was, he didn't even know what they were talking about. He could have grandstanded, oh, I felt threatened.
Well, that's not going to be enough for Putin to stop bombing
No,
Ukraine.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well, even better. And I had a good relationship, very good, with both of them. I would tell Zelensky, no more. You got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give more than they ever got if we have to. I will have the deal done in one day. One day.
Yeah, one day. We're 16 months in. One day turned into a first 100 days. And then he said, I was just joking. I wasn't being serious. Okay, and then it turned into 4 months, 6 months, and now then it's just off the table. Now he's not even trying. So where is the trust from the Ukraine side? Where is the trust from the Russian side? Where's the trust from the European side? Trump said he was going to come in. He said, I would tell Zelensky that he has to bring this down to an end. Now, that lines up exactly with what Doug McGregor said on our show before President Trump inaugurated. And he said, I would advise President Trump to tell Zelensky to shut this down, that either he does it on his own or we're going to do it for him. And we're going to stop all of our support, et cetera, so that you have to bring it to an end. He never did it. Instead, he changed the conditions and terms and, said a bunch of stuff like, you know what, I'm going to sell a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to sell Ukraine a bunch of stuff. And I think they call it the Pearl program, where we would, where European countries would buy our stuff and then sell it too. So he did not do what he said. He lied. He told you, the American people, he told the Ukrainians, he told the Europeans that he was going to shut this thing down. One day we're going to have it open. And instead, he just kept on making money for the elites, and the war hawks made them happy. The industrial complex, military industrial congressional complex, trough continues on. They don't care who pays for it. They don't care if Ukraine pays for it themselves or it comes from European countries. They could care less, as long as somebody's paying for it and it's keeping the trough going. Trump quit trying. He quit trying. And then this claim here, Putin would have been afraid of me. Putin wouldn't have done that if I'd have been in charge. Well, Putin is in charge. You are in charge, and he has done nothing to stop anything. So he is definitely not afraid of you. And now here we're sitting as we're making this video on the 29th of May. Russia has already warned and given advance warning to both Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as well as all the other Europeans, and publicly, that some big, huge strike is coming on Kiev, possibly within days. We'll see if they actually manifest it or not, but that's what they have claimed. Do you see any frightening, any scared positions from the Russian side, that he's afraid of President Trump? Have you seen President Trump do anything? Has he made a declaration that you will not do that? You will go no further. That's not going to happen. Or he hadn't even addressed it. Who's running that show? Who's running the show between the U.S. and Israel? This morning, Israeli press is saying that the Israeli Defense Forces are moving north of the Litani River in Lebanon, the very place where the Iranians said, you have to stop all of that or there's no deal. They went further than they had ever gone before, further than they'd ever even talked about going before. It used to be established up to the Litani River. Now they're going forward to that. Who's in charge of that deal? Is there any trust anywhere there? President Trump keeps saying all these things. He does none of them. And now then this war could expand because President Putin doesn't trust anything President Trump says. And they wanted all these negotiated deals all the time, all during the Biden administration, but also during the 16 months of President Trump's term, and nothing has happened. So he has no trust in anything coming out of Washington. So he's now going to do whatever he thinks he needs to do on the ground in Ukraine, and God forbid, but quite possibly, we've shown you Ambassador Polyonsky, the Russian ambassador to the OSCE, the European organization. They may strike into Europe as a deterrent to stop the fighting war here. President Trump never did it. He couldn't do it. He said he would. He didn't do it. So now then Russia's going to take matters into their own hands, and that could expand the war beyond the borders of Ukraine. And God only knows what could happen here. All of this because not one word out of President Trump's mouth can be taken at face value, period. This is a critical, huge point for our country and an enormous point of vulnerability. Nobody trusts us. Nobody believes a word. Therefore, we can't get any kind of a negotiated deal because who's going to trust us unless we start giving stuff up first? That's the only thing that could resurrect and could salvage this disaster, is if we start giving stuff first. I don't know that President Trump has it in him to do that. It's the right thing. It's the logical thing. It's the thing that would be America first, because I'm going to put the needs of the country above my own personal needs. And if that means I have to sacrifice my arrogance and hubris, I'll do that if it's going to save the country. I know what a mockery that is, to say that Trump actually does care about the people of America, but that's where we are. So if we don't make some changes really fast, then this whole war in the Middle East could blow up. And again, even kicking the can down the road now than you can see from the Iranian side. That might not work either, because they may be saying, hey, we're going to take direct action. If your blockade doesn't come off, we may force the matter. So that decision could be taken out of President Trump's hands too. One could imagine that claim, that soundbite is probably in the discussion in the situation room as we speak right now. We'll see what's going to happen with that. We'll see what's going to happen in Europe. That could explode in our faces too. And President Trump will be shown to be powerless in a time when he had enormous credibility of the United States, enormous reputation. He could have done what he said. He could have listened to Doug McGregor and ended the Ukraine war when he first came into office. And within 3 to 6 months, it would have come to an end. It would have been an ugly end, but it would have been an end. No one else would have died, and that situation would now be off the table. Now it'd be in the recovery phase. This war should never have happened. We had a deal in his hand, a golden opportunity that was better than the Obama deal, and genuinely so, and he threw it in the trash. So now who's going to believe anything he says? That's why this is so important. Every time he fails to keep his word, to do what he said, we get in more and more trouble. And these troubles are building up kind of and above, and he still has the facade that everything's fine. I haven't looked today, but the stock market seems to be going at all-time record because these manipulating statements that he makes, they're thinking, oh, yay, it's going good. The price of oil comes down. That's a mirage. It's not real. As all these people are telling you, it's about to all come crashing down. And this may be our last chance to avoid the worst of the crash. I think it's too late to avoid some kind of a crash. We just have to hope that it's not too bad, because if he keeps going down what he's done, if he keeps lying to the American people and he keeps lying to our adversaries, then this crash is going to be significant. We're going to keep it out. We're going to be back in about 23 minutes from now, where Nima Al-Horshid is going to come give us what is the word. What are the Iranian side saying? He's great because he has a lot of contacts inside of Iran. Of course, he can read the Iranian press in ways that we can't. So he's going to have some great points to put here. That's going to be at 12:30 p.m. on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and we'll see you shortly. Don't forget to tell your friends, the ones that love to listen to podcasts. Get them to add Daniel Davis Deep Dive to their podcast list. They need to know what you know. They can get it to where they already get their podcast. You just got to tell them.
And the United States of America over the last few days. The Americans bombed Bandar Abbas.
Into believing that he has a good deal. He's like a used car salesman. He's trying to sell you a lemon, pretending that it's it goes from 0 to 60 in high speed. This is what's going. If he accepts an agreement, it becomes clear that he lost the war. So he's looking for a deal, and he's going to break the deal. The Russians have rightly said that the United States is agreement incapable. We can't make an agreement, and we won't make an agreement, and there won't be an agreement. They may sign a piece of paper, but understand, even the piece of paper they sign put off things like the nuclear issue for a period of time. I can guarantee you that when that time is met, Trump is going to be unhappy and say the deal is no longer valid. Guarantee you. We have to renegotiate. This is a bad deal. The Iranians aren't living up to their, what they said they were going to do. This isn't what we talked about. That's just where we're at right now. So there's a lot of stupid skirmishing taking place as the United States attempts to assert itself, because it's important for Donald Trump when he enters into, whatever this is going to be called, that he be seen by the American people as being the alpha dog. He's the one that has to be peeing on the other person, not the other way around. And right now he's getting peed on by the Iranians because the Iranians run the war. They get to dictate the terms of the outcome. Trump says there will be no money exchange for passage of Strait of Hormuz. Sorry, Donald, baby, that ship has sailed. Whoever goes through the Strait of Hormuz is paying money straight up, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can flex your non-existent muscle all you want by bombing targets of no significance at Bandar Abbas, but if you flex too hard, the Iranians will flex back and end up, destroying nations. See, the United States, using conventional power, can't destroy Iran. Iran overnight can destroy the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain. They can make eastern Saudi Arabia uninhabitable. There's a number. Qatar can stop being a major producer of gas. All of this can happen overnight, and there's nothing the United States to stop that, which is why the skirmishing, I don't believe, is going to turn into anything bigger, because the U.S. can't afford to have it turn into something bigger. This is simply posturing by the United States, tragic posturing, because people are dying. And it may cost American service members their lives. Donald Trump's playing with fire here. Fire is the ultimate two-way street. It burns everybody. And so that's where we're at. But I just think people need to understand that Donald Trump is incapable of agreeing to what the Iranians have put on the table. He will find a way to caveat it, to cover it, to shade it, so that at the first available window of review, I think in 30 days, he'll say they're not in compliance. We need to renegotiate, something of that nature. But it's also essential that oil get flowing. There was a very pointed statement made by the CEO of, I think, Chevron about the oil supply in the world coming up, and he said that we've been cheating. We've been flooding the market with strategic reserves to compensate for the lack of oil flowing out of the Middle East. But those strategic reserves aren't bottomless. And, eventually, and whether it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks, we are going to run into a major global oil shortage. And, this is going to be devastating for the global economy and devastating for Donald Trump politically. He needs to get oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, one way or the other, and he can't do it militarily, so he's going to have to accept the Iranian terms. He can threaten to bomb Oman all he wants, but that's not going to change any outcome.
What does it say about his nature, though? The fact that on that day he threatened to bomb 3 countries. One of them was Oman, the other one was Iran. This kind of, I understand that in his mind he thinks I'm acting tough to the media, I'm acting tough to my base, but it just comes across as being extremely irrational. And this kind of impression that people get of America, which was always quite positive, like there was this kind of elegance, this eloquence, is not really coming across. What's your thoughts about that in terms of the way he's presenting the U.S. in the world stage?
Look, Donald Trump is an embarrassment to the United States of America. He's an embarrassment to the office of presidency. He doesn't govern as a president. He governs as a dictator. We're not functioning as a constitutional republic. We're functioning as a cult of personality. Donald Trump is afflicted by narcissistic personality disorder. This is a mental illness. It's diagnosable long distance. According to DSM, he exhibits all 5 traits. And even though some people say that it doesn't necessarily manifest itself in a psychotic manner like other mental illnesses, malignant narcissistic personality disorder does manifest itself in an antisocial behavior. And that's what we're seeing here. This is a mentally ill man. So you see what's going through the mind of Donald Trump. Not even Donald Trump knows what's going through the mind of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not well. He is insane. He is legally insane. If he were to be arrested for a crime, he could probably get off on a defense of insanity, temporary or otherwise. But this is the reality. No rational human being makes the statements that Donald Trump makes. I mean, even the dumbest of dumb MAGA supporters understands you don't get to talk like this. This is not how polite society speaks. This is not how a president of the United States is supposed to speak. This is the kind of language you get from the drunk in the end of the bar on a Friday night after the last girl has been picked up by the Cowboys and he's left all alone, looking at a pool table that he can't compete in because he's peed his pants, because he's incontinent, because he's just old and stupid and all that. This is Donald Trump. He's a pathetic human being, really. I'm just being straight up. You know this, and your audience knows this. You see this with your own eyes. You just don't like to articulate it because the consequences of acknowledging what is happening here is mind-bending. I mean, what the hell has happened to the United States of America that we not only produced a leader of this nature, elected, re-elected, but we keep him in power? This is why the founding fathers, well, actually it was an amendment. It wasn't the founding fathers. This is why we came up with the 25th Amendment. So we could remove insane individuals who are no longer capable of governing. He may be able to physically stand up and move around, but his brain isn't there. This is not a well man. And yet now we put him in a very stressful situation. And people who aren't well don't respond well to stress. And you see it back and forth, ping-ponging, irrational statement after irrational statement. There's no other way to do this. I can't sugarcoat this. You know, I'd like to be able to sit here and go, well, Donald Trump's just playing 4D chess. You know, he's a genius, really. I mean, the guy is smarter than smart. He's just playing this game. This is an emotional game that he's playing, trying to play up the emotions. But deep inside, Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing. No, he doesn't. Because if he knew what he's doing, we wouldn't be in this war. We're in this war because this shallow, intellectual, incapable man, well, was spoon-fed horse manure by Benjamin Netanyahu. And he disregarded the advice of his cabinet. All of them said, don't trust the Israelis on this one. This isn't going to go down the way they think it's going to go down. And he got our nation, his nation, the nation he's the chief executive of, involved in a war we cannot win. We knew we couldn't win this. Donald Trump knew he couldn't win this. You know, people reflect on the fact, when was it, 2019, when a global hawk was shot down over the Strait of Hormuz, maybe 2020. And Donald Trump said, I'm going to bomb the Iranians in retaliation for them shooting down our drone. And the military went, I'm out, buddy. You bombed them. They're going to send missiles. Then we have to escalate. Now we're going to be into a cycle of escalation that we lose because we don't have the force structure able to defeat the Iranians. So they're going to shut the Strait of Hormuz, hammer oil production, and we don't have anything to respond to. It's going to take us a year and a half to build up the military force necessary to surge in. The global economy is going to collapse by then. Mr. President, do not bomb Iran. He knew then that we can't control the Strait of Hormuz. He was told by the Pentagon, we can't do it. And there was no radical transformation in our force posture in the region that changed that outcome. We never could do it, not in recent history, not since the Iranians developed missiles that can reach out and touch us, tens, hundreds of kilometers offshore. This is just a statement of fact. He knew it then. He should have known it then, but he's insane. I mean, this, I don't think he was this insane. He suffered from narcissistic personality disorder for his entire life. You just take a look at Donald Trump, that's who he is. But the malignancy of it, even during his first administration, didn't necessarily manifest itself. But when the election was stolen from him in 2020, and the bitterness that came in, it literally melted his brain. And the resentment he has that to not just Joe Biden and the Democrats, but to the American people. He resents the fact that the American people allowed this to happen. He hates the American people. Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump. And so this presidency is marked by his extreme narcissism. This man is a walking, talking egomaniac of the worst kind. He built a golden idol to himself in Mar-a-Lago and had religious figures come and pray to God through the idol. Read the damn Bible. It doesn't work out for people who believe in God to put up a false idol and pray to that false idol. Biblical remedies tend to be spoken of in terms of smitten. God reached down and smote you. Melania, don't look over your shoulders because you will turn into a pillar of salt. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that Donald Trump's engaged in. Mentally healthy people don't do this. sorry to go on the ramble, but I mean, I need to emphasize this point. Quit thinking that the United States operates on the basis of rational leadership. We have a mentally ill man in the White House surrounded by sycophants who refuse to do what's necessary to remove this ill man from office.
Yeah. By the way, I agree with you, and also the pressure of all the court cases, thinking he may spend the rest of his life in prison. All of these things probably played all the major factors in what you're referring to in terms of the pressure that he's getting. Guys, on the X Space, we're going to be moving to the YouTube, so click on the link in the nest, and if you're on the YouTube, make sure you like the video. Now, we have got some breaking news, Scott. Obviously, we've been getting details about what's in the MOU. New York Times is reporting that another part of what's in the MOU is reparations for Iran, but they actually detail what those reparations are. It's $300 billion of reparations to Iran. This is in addition to Iran, as you mentioned, having complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. This is in addition to Iran basically having the ability to enrich uranium within the parameters, about 3.69%. And it's in addition to the unfreezing of at least 50% of the assets and the removal of sanctions on oil and energy initially, with a conversation about in total removal. What's your thoughts about how the deal seems like it's, as you mentioned, Iran won, but the deal seems like it is something that, if it's agreed upon, is Iran getting exactly what they want?
Well, it's Iran getting exactly what they want. And Iran's not going to yield on this. There's no yielding on Iran. The United States holds no leverage over Iran. What are we going to do? Threaten to keep sanctions in place? We've done that for 47 years. We're going to increase the sanctions? I don't think there's anything more we can sanction in Iran. We're going to threaten to bomb them? We did that for 37 days. That didn't turn out too well. There is literally no leverage left, none whatsoever. Iran holds all the cards. It's the United States economy that's going to collapse this summer. And it's Donald Trump's political, legacy that's going to be erased. When he loses the midterms, and he will lose the House, there's just virtual guarantee, unless he does something radical in terms, that is a direct affront on American democracy. He's positioned to lose the House, which means the next 2 years will be spent, going on trial for impeachment. And trust me, the Democrats will impeach. If he doesn't get convicted, they'll impeach again. They have 2 years to impeach this man. And we know they'll do it multiple times because they did it twice at the end of his last term. This man is so impeachable because he doesn't function as a constitutionally directed executive of a constitutional republic. He functions as a dictator in total disregard for the rule of law. And so he will be impeached. Whether he's convicted is up to the Senate. And there's still a possibility that A, the Republicans could hold on to the Senate, or B, they can lose it by a margin that means that you'll never get the 60% necessary to convict. And that'll keep him out of jail. But if we have a total economic collapse this summer, which is the direction we're heading, James Carville's magic words on the door of the war room in Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign, "It's the economy, stupid," will come back to haunt Donald Trump. Just ask George Herbert Walker Bush, the winner of Desert Storm, the greatest military victory of American history. I mean, my God, we went out there and we smoked the fourth largest army in the world, kicked their ass. And we had victory parades, and the American people were in love with America again. We got rid of the shame of Vietnam. He was so electable. He was a guarantee he was going to win the election in 1992, except, read my lips, no new taxes. And then he taxed the American people. It's the economy, stupid. It's the only thing that matters here in America. We don't care about anything else. We are a capitalist society, a consumer-driven society, which means we need to have money. And when Americans open up their wallet and they go through their wallet, and instead of a $100 bill, all they have is a $1 bill, they're not happy because their bills they got to pay their bills. The tax man cometh. So does the mortgage collector. So does the electric company. So does the oil company. You don't get to drive your car without paying for the gas, and it's gone through the roof right now. What used to cost me $36 to fill up a tank cost me $58 yesterday. All right? I don't make that much money, and the money I make, I'm just watching it go away, one tank of gas at a time, as all other Americans are. And there's also costs, because when you start paying more costs for fuel, it's greater cost for transport. And that money, the producers aren't going to eat that cost. They put it onto the consumer. So when I finally get a tank of gas and go to the store and start buying things, my grocery bills are going through the roof. Anything I buy is going through the roof. If I take my wife out to dinner, which I like to do, but taking her out to dinner, we were talking about it. A restaurant that we used to go and be able to pay $40 cost me $86 to take her out to dinner. Now, I love my wife, but there can't be too many $86 meals left because I can't afford it. It's not that I don't love her. I just can't afford to take her out because I don't have the money. And if I'm doing that, every American's doing it. We live paycheck by paycheck. And when we get the collapse of our income, or the collapse of the purchasing power of our income, so that we don't make enough to even survive, people will start losing their homes. This summer is going to be a very, very difficult summer for the American people. And it's going to be politically devastating for the Republicans, and it's going to be politically devastating for Donald Trump unless he does something to turn it around. And the only way he can turn it around right now is to have a deal with Iran. So he's going to have to swallow a poison pill, but he's not going to be happy about this at all. And when I say he's agreement incapable, Donald Trump will do whatever it takes to ensure that the American people perceive that he's the top dog. Because what you just described is definitely Donald Trump lying on the ground getting peed on by the alpha dog Iranian. That's just the way it is. Losers get peed on by the big dog. And he's going to try and convince the American public that he's the one peeing on the Iranians. That ain't going to happen. I don't know how first of all, thank goodness for the Iranians for sticking to their guns. We attacked them, just so the audience understands. We attacked them. We attacked them in the most cowardly manner, an act of perfidy, where we were pretending to have a negotiation to resolve the issue we said was worthy of war, the nuclear issue, and there was an agreement. The Omani foreign minister was flying the United States to finalize this agreement, and we in Israel bombed Iran. A cowardly act in the middle of the night, murdering Ali Khamenei, which was supposed to be the golden ticket, killing this man, collapsing the Iranian regime, no missiles worried about, no nuclear program, nothing, because we now own Iran. It didn't work out that way because we're too dumb to even understand that Iran is a constitutional republic with institutions of government that are linked to, not just religion, but also national pride. And if you go around knocking off the supreme leader, the Iranian people will rally to the government as they did. The Iranian government's stronger today than it was when the war started in terms of the support of the people. I mean, so that's where we're at. This is the reality. And the Iranians are right to say you have to pay for every brick you took down. You have to pay for every body you killed. You have to pay for the 165 children you slaughtered in Manab. And we do have to pay. We were in the wrong. There was no justification under international law. There was no moral argument to be made. This was purely a naked act of aggression, a war of aggression, which according to the Nuremberg trials, Judge Jackson, is the highest crime, the highest war crime, because from this act, all other crimes are emanated. Every crime we committed against Iran, and we committed so many crimes over the course of this 37-day war and ongoing to this point, those people we murdered in Bandar Abbas, it's not an act of self-defense by the United States. We had no legitimate claim to bomb Bandar Abbas, none whatsoever. So when we drop bombs on Bandar Abbas today, we're murdering people, and we should be held accountable. Now, they'll never be able to get the perpetrators of these crimes to a court. They can't make the United States pay for their crime. And $300 billion seems to be a fair price to pay. And I'm glad that they've insisted on that. And I'm glad I don't know what mechanism, how they're going to get that $300 billion. What are we going to do? Increase the defense bill, the defense budget by another $300 billion to get the American taxpayer to pay? I mean, yay, America. Guess what? Donald Trump went to war and now we owe $300 billion, to the Iranians. That's on top of the money we spent going.
Salute to Dame Dash fam. Stop using Dame Dash motherfucking name, boy, for your foolishness. But I appreciate your donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love. This little capper say, little flip say you be captain. Salute to the leprechaun. He know the truth.
Going to war. We haven't even calculated that expense honestly. Because I think by the time we end up counting all the dollars associated with this, we're looking at over $100 billion spent on this 37-day campaign. Trust me, the numbers will add up eventually when they all comes in, because we don't do anything cheap in America. We have grifters. We have scam artists. We have defense industry that gouges. The replacement costs alone for the munitions that we expended are going to be unreal. That all has to be factored in. So there it is. So if you go 300 plus 100, that's a $400 billion catastrophe. I mean, our savings and loans crisis didn't even come up to that. This was totally self-inflicted. So I'm glad Iran is holding the line. I'll be surprised if they get that 300 billion. I still need to know where that's coming from and how politically that's going to manifest itself because, sorry, Donnie, baby, you may be a dictator in your own mind, but the Constitution gives the power of the purse to the United States Congress. And you don't have the ability to unilaterally generate $300 billion to give away. Congress is going to have to step in here right now. And I don't see Congress going, that's a good idea. Let's give Iran $300 billion. Now, maybe we do it by, but again, I mean, there's frozen assets, but they don't add up to $300 billion.
Scott, my understanding is it's going to come from the Gulf states because the way he wrote it is he's going to manage it. So it's almost like the Gaza fund. But if you look at the Gaza fund, there's no money in it. No one's even put any money in it. But the yeah.
Yeah. So what? I mean, so wait a minute. Now I'm Saudi Arabia, and I've got. I mean, they always do. Vision 2023. Well, we're a couple of years. So I think it's Vision 2030. Yeah. Vision 2030. It's a great thing to have a vision. But where's the money come from? I mean, they're already pressed to come up with the money for Vision 2030 because half of Vision 2030 was about diversifying the economy so you weren't totally dependent upon energy. So here they are told to diversify their economy, but the only money maker they have is oil. And now they're told that you got to generate funds and you can't do the diversification because if you're busy generating money and you can't wow. What, UAE? They just broke free of OPEC. OPEC should go, that's okay, UAE, sell all your oil, but it all goes to Iran. That's not what the UAE broke free of OPEC for. They're going to sell all the oil so they could generate a lifeline to Israel. and now they're told, no, that money's got to divert to Iran. I mean, look, here's this is the harsh truth. The Gulf Arab states exist only because Iran allows them to exist today. These pathetic remnants of British colonial period, these new neo-colonial acolytes of an empire that no longer exists, picked the wrong horse to bet on. They lost the race. They put everything on the horse, and the horse lost. And now it comes time to pay the piper. They have no choice, but this is going to be a hard pill for them to swallow too. I mean, imagine if you're an American now, be the Europeans now. Wait a minute. We all want to go to war with Russia. That's what we're saying. We're going to go to war with Russia. 2030, we're going to war with Russia. And you're telling me that the United States is going to let us go to war with Russia. We're going to get our asses handed to it. And then we're going to have to pay the Russians reparations for, because this is the model. This is the precedence being set. America starts the war, loses the war, walks away, and the other people who are on the side end up paying the price. Imagine being Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan, you will pay the price. Japan and South Korea, you will pay the price. You know who's not going to pay the price? America. We just walk away. We have big oceans, and we just walk across the ocean, come back to our little fortress America, and we hide out. I mean, so yeah, this is fascinating. I mean, it's a.
No, ain't gonna be no hiding out. Putin, China, North Korea, and I already warned the U.S. Not this time. The oceans will not save us.
As an American, I have to be honest. It's shameful. We lost. I mean, my God, how did that happen? We don't lose. We can beat ourselves. We've done that historically. Vietnam, but I all of my peers in the Marine Corps were Vietnam veterans, and last time I checked with them, they won every battle. And that's all the job of a Marine is to do, is to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. The North Vietnamese did not win a meaningful tactical engagement. They did not win an operational engagement. Every time they went up against the Marine Corps, they lost, and they lost badly. Same thing with the Army most of the time. Now, we committed atrocities. I'm not defending what we're doing. I'm just saying that we don't lose. Ask the Taliban. Taliban will tell you when they fight in the Marines. They said, when we found out we were fighting the Marines, we had to change our tactics because we learned the hard way that if we shoot at the Marines, they don't shoot back, they run towards us. And that's what happens. You want to play with the Marine Corps, we will drive a bayonet through your frickin' chest. That's what we do. And we lost against Iran, not by beating ourselves. The Iranians beat us. This is humiliation beyond belief. I mean, congratulations, Iran. Hats off to you. You got to call it as you see it. Good job. But as an American, this is humiliating. We've not been in this position.
Scott said America was going to destroy Iran. They should make the deal. And I told y'all that was all a lie when it came out of his mouth. He was low key playing psychological warfare, trying to get his passport back. I told y'all the Iranians wasn't going to go for that shit. They are a modern military. They guerrilla fighters with advanced weapons. That's a fact. The U.S. done been beat by all the guerrilla fighters that they never fought. How the fuck you going to beat guerrilla fighters with advanced weapons? Come on, bro.
Ever in our history where we lost a war and we have to pay reparations. Think about it. We lost a war and we have to pay reparations. We're having the terms of conflict termination dictated to us by the victorious power. This is a shameful moment in American history, a shameful moment. And all Americans should reflect on this, that we got beat. And yet we have this idiot president, this insane man who keeps talking about flexing his muscles. You do understand we've got nothing left in the arsenal. They're gonna prosecute members of Congress for having the courage to say we don't have any ammo left. Shot it all, gone. It's the truth, but they don't want us to tell the truth because the American people are supposed to believe that somehow we're still strong enough to win a war. We just got beat by the Iranians. Then you have idiots like the Lithuanian foreign minister saying, hey, NATO can take out Kaliningrad. With what? Long-range strike weapons that can overcome air defense and area denial weapons. Did we just try that with Iran and lose? Now you want to, and Iran, they're good, but they're like college team, good college team. You want to go up against the NFL champions, Russia, and you want to take on Russia with your standoff weapons. Are you stupid? And the answer is yes. Taiwan. You don't think the Chinese can literally overwhelm anything Taiwan has in terms of air defense now? The United States just proved it doesn't work. The Taiwanese technology isn't better than our technology, by damn, sir, and our technology doesn't work. We don't have it anymore, even if it did work. So this is one of those major events in history that will go down in history. It's like when the Roman Empire started to tilt, when they started losing legions in the Hyrcan forest, and they started losing against the Persians, and it's it. We lost. We got beat. That's never happened before. Nobody has ever beat the United States of America in a stand-up fight before. The Iranians just did.
Yeah. Now, another element of this is, Scott, I was speaking to Larry, and his source told him that the deal was actually overlargingly agreed, but then Netanyahu got on the phone and he's been pressurized to pull away from the deal. And since then, obviously, the Israelis have conducted atrocities in Lebanon, carpet bombing the country, expanding into the country through a wide range of means. And he's saying he's going to expand the ground invasion when they're so close to a deal. And then you saw the Zionist lobby and many politicians such as Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Randy Fine, various others get on the phone call with Trump and pressure him not to agree to the deal. What do you think's happening there? Do you think that they're going to make it impossible for a deal to be agreed? What's your thoughts from that perspective?
Well, I have not seen on a war room yet. It's the Zionist lobby, stupid. We have American politics is about money, straight up. And the only reason why the Israeli lobby has the influence they do is because they have money. Now, I know people can call that anti-Semitic. It's truth, okay? They sit there and brag about putting $100 million into the 2024 campaign to buy Congress, which they did. They just spent over $30 million to kick Thomas Massey out of Kentucky. So money talks, and that's just the reality of it. And so, and money, $200 million to Donald Trump from Miriam Adelson bought a hell of a lot of Zionists surrounding him in his cabinet. And, yes, there's a lot of pressure. So they can pick up the phone and they can make these calls and pressure can happen. I agree that all that's happening. But let's just get back to basics. It's the economy, stupid. And I can guarantee you, when an American politician is staring death in the face, political death in the face, he's going to choose the economy over Israel every single time, especially if he's the president of the United States. So this is an act of desperation. First of all, Netanyahu's been threatening to kick the hell out of everybody from day one. Last time I checked, even though he committed genocide against Gaza, does he control Gaza yet? Has Hamas been defeated? No. Hezbollah, I thought they were gone. Nasrallah was murdered, and the pagers went off, and everybody lost their hands and their fingers, and that was it. How can you fight when your fingers look like this? Sorry, that's probably going to get picked up by somebody and show that Skywriter's insensitive to the plight of the people who were butchered by Israel. I'm not. What I'm trying to be is to point out that the last time I checked, the IDF was getting a snot kicked out of by Hezbollah on the front lines, and Hezbollah has brought in drone warfare in a major way, similar to the scope and scale of what's been seen in the Ukrainian-Russian fight, and they are denying the Israelis freedom of movement 20 kilometers in the other direction. It's not Israel projecting its power forward. It's Hezbollah dominating the battlefield at the point of contact 20 kilometers deep, to include inside Israel, where these FPV drones are striking logistics and command and control and air defense targets. So Netanyahu can do what Netanyahu does: murder people, put airplanes over target, drop bombs, and murder people. But at some point in time, Donald Trump will pick up the phone and say, stand down. And Israel has no choice. Netanyahu knows this. Why do you think he got up and gave the statement he did the other day, that Israel has to decouple itself from the United States financially in 10 years? Oh, it's going to have to be sooner than that, baby, because you're blowing it, pal. 60% of the Americans don't agree with Israel anymore. That number is going to get even worse this summer, when it's going to get close to 100%, because it's the economy, stupid. And when people realize we went to war based on Israeli lies, and a peace deal that could have brought the oil flowing back was stopped because of Israeli lies and Israeli murder, America's going to cut the umbilical cord. Cut the umbilical cord. And all those pro-Israeli people are either going to go down screaming, picking up the phone, but no answer. Look, this isn't the first time. In the lead up to Desert Storm, the Yitzhak Shamir and others were picking up the phone, complaining. And Paul Wolfowitz, who's a known neocon, pro-Israeli Zionist, basically said, we're not answering the phone anymore because we're insisting you adhere to what we say. We don't adhere to what you say. And he gave the White House a switchboard and said, call that when you're ready to talk. But until then, don't call me, because I'm not talking to you. That's how we should be talking to Israel, putting them on notices, who's large and who's in charge. And it's us, even though we just got beat. But you know what? Israel got beat too. It was a joint effort. And the Israelis didn't win. And the other thing we know is Israel can't do it by themselves. This is a big gambit on the part of Netanyahu, who's desperate now. He's dug himself a huge political hole. He's still being prosecuted, or he's on trial right now for corruption. And when the truth is known, when all these commissions are held about October 7th, about the conduct of the conflict in Gaza, what he's done in Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, he's going to turn out not to be the security guru of Israel, but the man who single-handedly destroyed Israel. That's his legacy. So that what you're seeing is desperation right now. But I will, I don't know what that was. I know there's Kalshi and there's something else where you bet on outcomes. I won't do that, but I'm just saying, if I did do that, I'd bet on the fact that Donald Trump picks oil over Israel, because that's how we survive in America. The pro-Israeli lobby is a parasite that attaches itself to the American host. We're not going to feed the parasite when the host is dying.
See, ordinarily, Scott, I'd agree in the sense of if he'd put America first, and I agree with you, the economy is going to collapse. This is why SpaceX, Anthropic have brought their IPOs earlier, because they want to get the boom now, because they know a bust is coming. So I totally agree with you in terms of the economy. But that being said, if you look at Trump's actions, he's not taking the economy into consideration. He's not taking the American people into consideration. Right now, yes, America is losing. Yes, America and the world and Europe, it's much worse, are being harmed. But Trump is becoming richer and richer and richer. And he's as you mentioned, you described it. You said he's a sociopath, he's a narcissist, and they only care about themselves. And so when he's looking at it for himself, he's thinking, I'm making billions, I'm enriching my family for generations. So do I need to worry about the economy? We can manipulate the economy as much as possible. And if it crashes, he'll probably manipulate his own base and to blame someone else. I mean, this could be what he's thinking as well. Or do you think that's not possible in terms of his thought?
Again, you're using some difficult language here, Suleiman. Donald Trump thinking. Right off the bat, we have a problem, because he's an insane man. So, there may be thought processes going through his head, but they're thought processes of a mentally ill individual. I agree that the man is inherently greedy. I mean, he is the epitome of capitalist scum. I mean, he's the exact thing that we should never want to become. A man with no moral values, no moral principles, who literally touches everything in gold. He believes he's King Midas. Everything I touch turns to gold. He doesn't realize that was a curse, that when you touch something turns to gold, it dies, and soon everything is dead and your wealth is meaningless. But the other thing that's going to come up to him, because there might be moments of lucidity in this insane man's mind, the greed that he's doing right now, and the manipulation of the markets will be subjected to investigation at some point in time when the Democrats come into power. And the crimes will be identified, the criminals will be identified, and eventually they'll be held to account. Donald Trump can only be president for 2 more years after this election. And as I said, this presidency is going to be defined by paralysis going forward. He's not going to be able to have the freedom of action that he's had here. Congress will restrain him. The House will restrain him. And then he will go away. Now, even if he doesn't get convicted and go away in handcuffs, he will return to a nation that will probably be thrust into the control of Democrats seeking to get retribution. So Donald Trump's wealth will disappear in a heartbeat. It's a statement of fact. And so at some point in time, somebody has to whisper in his ear and say, you need to do damage control here, buddy, because you're literally committing suicide, not only for you, but your family and your legacy. That when this is done, the Democrats are going to do to Donald Trump what the Romans did to Carthage. They're going to sow salt in the fields. They're going to level the city, sow salt in the fields, and kill everybody. And Carthage will no longer exist. And Donald Trump will no longer exist when this is done. Every edifice he's put up will be blown up. Every property he has will be taken away from him. All money will be taken away from him. His family will be prosecuted. His daughters will end up in jail. His sons will end up in jail. All their supporters will end up, because they are criminals of the highest order. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but at some point in time, he's got to look in the mirror and understand that the justice is coming. And it's not the justice I want. I don't believe in revenge-motive politics. It destroys America. It's bad for America. But it doesn't matter whether I believe in it or support it. It's going to happen because he did it. What goes around comes around. Sow the wind, weep the whirlwind. He has turned the Department of Justice into a political revenge machine. I mean, he has indicted Barack Obama. So maybe Barack Obama deserves to be indicted, but there's a reason why Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon, because we don't play the convict president stupidity game. That's the game that's being played right now, and the most easily convicted president of all American presidents is Donald Trump.
Yeah. Now, Scott, I want to talk about Russia and Ukraine. Last night, there was a drone that hit a apartment building in Romania. The Ukrainians and the Romanians are claiming this was a Russian drone that came from Russia. We've not heard anything from Russia in terms of the specifics, whether it came or not. The Romanians seem to suggest that this was one of about 30 drones that were targeting Ukraine, and maybe it went off direction, so it may have been an accident. The Brits are coming out and attacking, obviously, as are many of the other European countries. Medvedev came out and said, look, we don't know whether this drone came from Russia or not, but what's the drama about? The Europeans have been helping with this war, helping with these attacks on Russia. And there's been a lot of conversations about how Europe's complicity, and many of the commentators and experts I've spoken to, I've spoken to Andrei Matinov and Dmitry Polyansky and various others, and many others have said as well that they feel like Iran maybe opened up the landscape in the sense of when Iran hit the Gulf states, it set a precedent that those who help facilitate and support and allow the areas to be used as operating bases, they are also open targets. What's your thoughts about everything that's happened over the last 24 hours and even the last week?
Well, first of all, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. No one really cares about this drone striking an apartment building. There's political haze being cut right now, but it's not a big deal. I mean, if we want to get into the legalities of it, the Ukrainians used electronic warfare to jam a drone, redirect it, and it flew into a Romanian apartment building. Russia is blameless on this, totally blameless. Ukraine, operated a weapon and operated the weapon in a way that, weaponized the Russian weapon against Romania. So legally speaking, it's Ukraine, all Ukraine's fault. But nobody wants to talk about it. They're just playing stupid games. What's Romania going to do? Mobilize the vaunted Romanian army? Or is the Brits going to mobilize their one brigade? They may be able to get together and bring it across the English Channel. I'm sure the Russians will just pee their pants and run when they hear the British are coming. What's Poland going to do? Mobilize a non-existent military? What are the Baltic states going to do? Bark louder? What is Germany going to do? Threaten to mobilize a 400,000 man army that doesn't exist and can't exist because the German people don't want to fight? What's France going to do? Nothing. The point is, they're all just yapping their stupid mouths. Russia didn't do anything wrong here. This isn't a crime. And Russia doesn't care about what Europe says anymore. Russia is not looking for a negotiated settlement to Ukraine where the European voice matters. Russia is not hoping the United States can moderate the European voice so that they can get Europe to agree to some sort of negotiated. Russia's in for the kill on Ukraine now, unconditional surrender. Ukraine will accept terms dictated by Russia, and that's the only way this war ends. Ukraine shouldn't have murdered 21 sleeping students in Starobelsk Teachers College. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's over for Ukraine. Game, set, match, Russia. And Europe doesn't know how to deal with that. So Europe's yapping, but they're scared to death because they understand a couple of things. That's why they had a Baltic drone conference the other day. The Baltics are under attack by Ukrainian drones. Imagine that. But Russia did the same thing. Ukraine flew drones through the Baltic states. Russia used electronic warfare to take control of the drones, and then flew the drones into targets in Latvia and Estonia. Caused the defense minister to resign because of the embarrassment of this. But Russia's also put, I think it's Latvia on notice that Latvia was getting ready to use their territory to facilitate a major drone campaign against Russia in June, probably targeting the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which convenes next week. And Russia said, well, we know where these targets are, and if this happens, we're going to take them out. You heard what I said. Russia has said, we will take out targets in Latvia, a NATO country. Russia doesn't care anymore about NATO. I mean, Sergei Karaganev's doctrine has become Russian policy. That basically Europe screwed up. Europe has been flapping its lips. You go back to Top Gun, CAG, commander of air group, talking to Maverick in Top Gun 1. Son, your mouth's cash and checks, your mouth's writing checks, your body can't cash. Well, guess what, NATO? Your mouths have been writing checks, your body can't cash. I mean, you got the Germans publishing this thing saying we're ready to go to war against Russia in 2029. The Brits are 1 year behind. We're ready to go to war in 2030. Mark Rutte saying we got to have a war like our grandfathers fought. The Russians are like, really? German grandfathers? They lost to us. The Russians don't care. Russia wanted to avoid all this, but it was thrust upon them. So screw Romania. If you don't want drones flying into your territory, whether it's accidental or, guess what's going to happen in the future, non-accidental, then stop supporting Ukraine. Stop carrying out acts of war against Russia. All of NATO are parties to this conflict. This is openly acknowledged as a proxy war between NATO and Russia, the United States and Russia. Marco Rubio said that, guys, in case everybody goes, who's got rid of this? Speak of it. Rubio acknowledged it. NATO's acknowledged it. It's a proxy war, which means we are parties to the conflict, which means we can be attacked legally by Russia. So I don't give a damn about a drone flying into Romania. I don't lose any sleep. I don't listen to the yapping coming from the pathetic chihuahuas in Europe right now. It's meaningless yap. Tell me one word that came out of a European that resonates meaningfully in Russia. One. Give me one where they're concerned. Give me one statement made by a European politician where the Russians went, whoa, gosh, we should have done that. This is serious now because somebody in Europe said something. Russia doesn't care. Europe is irrelevant. And you know who's deathly silent through all of this? The United States. The only voice Russia actually cares about is silent. Why? Because the U.S. just lost a war against Iran. Okay. You remember General Donahue last year? We can take out Kaliningrad. We have the ability to go in and overwhelm their air defense and area denial weapons. We come and take them all out. Hey, Donahue, you just tried that against Iran. Didn't work. And now you want to go up against the Russians in Kaliningrad. They will squish you like the bugs you are. NATO has no strength, no relevance, no viability, nothing. All talk, no action. Russia doesn't care. Russia's made the decision to defeat Ukraine, which means to defeat the collective West. Russia's more than happy to limit the battlefield to Ukraine, to grind the West down indirectly. But if the West wants to expand it, Russia's ready to make that call. The decisions have been made. Narishkin did not publish the 7 decision-making centers in Latvia on a whim. He did it to say, we have made the decision to strike these targets. Now just give us the excuse to strike. And there's other target decks being developed too. The production facilities for the drones that are being used to attack Russia are being identified and readied. And Russia has non-nuclear means to strike them. The Oreshnik missile, by the way. So I don't care. And nobody cares. Nobody of significant cares what the Romanians think about a drone striking an apartment building. Nobody cares because it's a non-event. I'm sorry for the people that were injured. I really am. But Russia's not losing any sleep about anything that's being said out of Europe in regards to this.
On the Oreshnik, you mentioned the college students. Ukraine hit a college apartment building, unfortunately killing 21 college students. In response, Russia had a major attack. It was about 90 missiles, Iskanders, about 600 drones, and they used the Oreshniks as well in Kiev. And then the Russians made a statement to tell everyone to leave Kiev if you're a foreigner, and if you're living in Ukraine, to stay away from military complexes, governmental buildings, and buildings that house intelligence services. And then apparently Lavrov got on the phone with Rubio and told him something similar about some major attack that's coming in Kiev. What's your understanding of this?
My understanding is that Ukraine, with their British masters directing them, with their German guidance system and their American intelligence, pushed it too far. You know, they've gotten away with murder, literal murder. And Russia's Vladimir Putin has not been in the business of trying to escalate this conflict. Russia has a winning hand in Ukraine called grinding everybody down through a war of attrition that's costing Ukraine millions of lives, costing the Western Alliance the totality of their defense and output. There's a reason why Europe doesn't have a military today, because it's all been eaten up inside Ukraine. And so, you know, Putin doesn't want to expand the conflict. So every time there's a red line, which are legitimate red lines, and they're crossed by the West, the Russians, you know, they slap a little bit and they just keep going. They don't seek escalation. My dogs agree with me on this one.
That's the Bakken armor.
Yeah. Well, believe me, my dogs have more oomph than anything Keir Starmer might have. And they're just Pomeranians and a Chihuahua myself. My Chihuahua will kick their Chihuahua's ass. But anyways, back to what we're talking about. But this murder of 21 girls, this was a strong, you know, when the British and the Americans empowered the Ukrainians to go into Kursk, because that was a NATO offensive into Kursk in August of 24, straight up NATO operation, planned by NATO, executed by NATO, using Ukraine as a proxy. The villages on the border, you know, the young people, the healthy people, for the most part, got away. The elderly, hundreds of them, stayed behind. They were all murdered. They were all murdered by the Nazis, literal Nazis. They weren't just murdered, they were raped. 80-year-old grandmothers raped in front of their family, then butchered. And these Nazis filmed it. Then they went off to fight the Russians, and the Akhmat Special Forces and the 810th Brigade of the Russian Marines killed them, because that's what Russians do. They kill Nazis. They're very good at it. And they killed them, and they collected the phones, and they have the images. This is not, you know, speculation. This isn't Israeli propaganda about what happened on October 7th, you know, the movie nobody ever sees. This is real stuff, real video. And yet the Russians had every right at that point in time to take Ukraine off the face of the earth. But Vladimir Putin ate that and said, no, we're just going to kill 80,000 Ukrainians that invaded Kursk, make a Sumy buffer zone, but we're not going to change the direction we're heading, strategic direction. When the British empowered the Ukrainians to do Operation Spiderweb, I think it's called. The trucks, the drone trucks that they then sent out, and they sent the drones. They struck bombers, strategic bombers. That should have had a nuclear weapon response. But the Russians didn't overreact. They said, okay, we can handle every atrocity committed by Ukrainians. Vladimir Putin wrote it out. Zelensky is getting ready to launch a major drone offensive in June. It's a British-run operation. The British are the ones who have directed it. It's all a British plan. And the British, are providing him with 16 to 20,000 drones. Zelensky's bragging about putting 6,000 drones in the air over Russia in a day. And this is all heading there. And the Russians still are like, well, we're not going to overreact here. We're going to ride this thing out. And there's increasing frustration inside Russia, not from the liberal elites, but from the conservatives who are pro-war. And they're just growing frustration that why aren't we doing anything? The perception that Russia can't finish the job starts to resonate. And Putin still wasn't going to overreact. Then they murdered 21 girls in their sleep. Well, I think 18 girls, 3 boys in their sleep. College students, teachers. These are the people whose job it will be to educate the next generation. These are the people that are necessary for society to survive, to continue. So in attacking these students, you're attacking the future of Russia. You're literally bringing into fruition the Nazi ethos of cultural genocide, to destroy a people, to destroy the nation, not just lives, but everything they stand for. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. This impacted Russia like in the West we will never understand. There is no turning back from this. There is no forgiveness. This is the red line that should never have been crossed. And you can't identify it. It's just one of those culminating moments. Had they struck this school a month ago, they might have gotten away with it. But right now, with everything the way it is, emotionally, Russia cannot allow this to go forward the way it was. And so Russia made a strategic decision that they are terminating all negotiations. There are no more negotiations. Russia's not going to negotiate. Only unconditional surrender on terms dictated by Russia. That's it. The Ukrainians are going to get the same deal that General Krebs got in Berlin and punished in a Russian court, or they're going to blow their brains out, or they can flee, like the Nazis did. They can run away to Brazil and Argentina, or wherever Nazis go these days, United States, Great Britain, France, all the safe havens of Nazi ideology. But they're not going to stay in Ukraine. It's over. That's the decision Russia made. So the first thing the Russians did is the attack that you saw was not the punishing blow against Ukraine. It was to punish those who attacked the college. And the Oreshnik actually hit underground facilities that were used for command and control and to assemble the drones which were launched from the airfield next to the Bielysyrkov facility. They struck. I love the pro-Ukrainian lunacy. The Russians hit a museum. The Russians hit a shopping mall. The Russians hit civilian targets. Like, you idiots. The Russians hit FP1 drone factories because the Ukrainians brag that they don't have them in traditional factories, or because the Russians would hit the factories. So they break them up and they put them in basements of museums. They put them in the garages of shopping malls. They put them in gymnasiums of schools. The Ukrainians admit doing this, and the Russians know it, and they took it out. But they took it out at nighttime when they didn't get too many collateral damage. I think the total number of civilians killed was 6, with an Oreshnik and 90 missiles coming in and hundreds of drones, and they killed 6 civilians. Yeah, the Russians are targeting civilians, you idiots. They're not. They're blowing up the defense industrial capacity and the drone warfighting capability of Ukraine. But now that's not enough, because that was just punishment for the attack. What's going to come next is the erasure of Ukraine. And it's not going to happen in one night. It's going to be a campaign. Look at a statement that came out of the Russian Duma from somebody in their defense committee. Because I'm of the opinion, just blow up the parliament, erase it. But he said, why? It's an empty building. You want me to use a $50 million Oreshnik against an empty building? Doesn't make any sense, does it? Mm-hmm. Blow up the president building. Why? It's empty. Use Oreshnik to blow that up too? No, we're going to use the Oreshnik against the underground command and control center at the moment when people are incited. So we will determine when we're going to strike. We will say there's people there now we need to kill, send the Oreshnik and kill them. That's what we're going to see. This is going to be a campaign that unwinds as targets present themselves. And the Russians will use the weapons necessary to eliminate these targets. It will be punishing, it will be long duration, and it will be fatal to Ukraine. Now, Russia can accelerate, for instance, if Ukraine decides to play stupid and attack the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum or continue long-range drone strikes into Russia's strategic depth. Russia can intensify things because understand, every time you do something, and the Russians proved this in their counterstrike the other day, the Russians collect all this information. They have the intelligence. And so the Russian retaliation will be instantaneous. So if you choose to escalate, then you just increase the target deck for the Russians to strike. And, it'll accelerate the process of, erasing Ukraine from the map of significance. The other thing, too, is if Europe wants to play this game, Russia's ready to bring it into Europe. Again, I remind the Latvian states that if you allow Ukraine to use your territory as a drone corridor to strike St. Petersburg, you will cease to exist. That's why I'm sort of excited to be in Russia next week at the St. Petersburg International Forum. I'm speaking, which is an honor, but I'll also be looking into the sky, seeing if the Ukrainians want to commit suicide. And then I'll look over the horizon to see if Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania still exist. Because they will be erased too. Russia's not playing games anymore. They murdered 21 college students. They murdered the future of Russia. The symbolism alone of the horrific nature of this attack. It wasn't an accident. Just understand this. This wasn't a case where they went, our drone went off. One drone flew off like the Russians. We didn't do that. The Ukrainians say, well, you jammed our drone. No. This was at least 4 FP1 drones with a different kind of drone overhead in the command and control function doing overwatch. The 4 drones came into a target that was selected based upon artificial intelligence. I mean, Palantir helped generate this target for the expanded target deck for the expanded campaign. It was a school, but according to AI, it was a school that had a military connotation. This is why the Ukrainians say there was a Rubicon drone operators there. No, dude, last month there happened to be a business, a career day at the college. Not this one, by the way, a different college, where the Russian military came in and did a career day. The people in the audience are college students. It wasn't just with drones or anything. They law enforcement, border security, the military. And the military guy said, one of the things we're looking for most are drone operators. And they brought in 2 guys from Rubicon who said, this is military recruitment. We do that every day in the United States. Every single college has a military recruitment. Does that mean the college now has become a combatant and has to be taken out? No, the law of war doesn't permit it. But AI doesn't operate under the law of war. It operates under excess, perverted notion of increased lethality, less legality. But the program, the same thinking that led to us striking Manab and murdering 165 Iranian students led to the striking of this. They launched 4 drones. The drones, FP1s, were modified to have air-to-ground rockets on them. It's a new modification that the Ukrainians are very proud of. But when you have air-to-ground rockets, you don't just fire them in a vacuum. You can take a drone and put a GPS thing and have the drone fly to a coordinate. But when you have air-to-ground rockets, it's controlled. You fly in. There's a controller back there looking and firing. Now, we know how they did it. There was Starlink. They had the small Starlink antennas on this. They're going up the command and control drone, send that signal back. Why do you think the Russians know where all this was happening? They were tracking the signals. The drones come in and they fire their rockets 4 times, 4 waves of rockets. You hear the eyewitness people talking about rockets coming from the sky. FP1 drones are propeller driven. They don't have rockets inherently. So firing the rockets. And then when it was done, the final attack, flying in. It was a phased attack. The first attacks with the rockets woke the girls up. They started to come out of the college, to come out of the exits. The second attack came in and struck them as they were coming out. Somebody's watching this happen. Somebody's directing this to happen. Somebody's pushing the buttons to make this happen. And then in the end, after they suppress the girls, they run back inside. The 4 drones hit and collapsed the dormitory on top of them. They were still screaming the next morning, the survivors. They couldn't get the bodies out. The rescuers are digging with their own hands because, I was just so you understand, I was part of a urban search and rescue team here in New York, trained in collapse response. And, there's a way to do this. You have to come in and you have to shore it up. It takes time. There was no time. So the rescuers are putting their lives on the line. They're trying to come in. They're digging with their own hands. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are launching an additional attack against the rescuers. They're trying to get the girls out. And some of these girls were screaming for hours before they succumbed to their injuries. Their families are there. Could you imagine being the family of a college girl? You're sending her off. She's going to be a teacher. And now you have to come in and listen to your daughter scream to death while the rescues tried to come. The families broke through the security and got on the pile themselves and were digging with their fingernails coming off, trying to dig through the soil to get to these people. You want to know why Russia's going to erase Ukraine? I just explained why. And all of Russia saw it. All of Russia saw it. The world decided not to look. BBC pretended it didn't happen. CNN was at the frickin' site of the attack. CNN was embedded with the drone unit that launched this attack. And you want to know why Russia's going to take Ukraine off the map? Yeah, because it's over. This isn't going to happen. It's not going to be tolerated. It's done.
Scott, one other question on this. The attack on Kiev that is coming, what do you foresee happening in that specific attack?
Look, they've said what's going to happen. They're going to take out command and control decision-making centers. They're going to take out defense industry. The Ukrainians have, one of the things Ukrainians have done, again, just understand, all these drones that Ukraine's manufacturing, they don't have a drone factory anymore because Russia took them out. So these little Mavic type drones, these quad, FPV drones, Ukrainian housewives have 3D printers and they print the parts in their homes. And they brag about it. You go on Ukrainian social media. Hi, I'm a housewife. Look behind me. Stack of drones. I make drones in my own home, on my own free time. It's like, people used to sell Avon products or something like that. Hi, I sell beauty products on the side. Hi, I make drones for the Ukrainian government on the side. And entire apartment blocks are drone factories. The housewives make the drones and they go down the basement, they assemble the drones and they send the drones out to the military. The Russians are tracking all this. They know it all. One of the reasons why they gave the advance notice is that basically, if they're going to take out defense industry, they're going to have to take out defense industry that has committed a war crime. By the way, if you turn a protected facility that's called an apartment complex of residences into, if you embed a defense industry without evacuating the civilians, you're committing the war crime. Understand that Ukraine is a 100% repeat offender when it comes to war crimes in terms of using civilians to shield their military. They've done it from day one in this war. They don't care about their people. The Russians are going to take all of this out piece by piece by piece by piece. Now, knowing the Russians being the Russians, they're probably not going to drop the apartment buildings up front. They're going to take out the assembly places too. But some of those assembly places are in basements of apartment buildings. So there will be consequences. So they said, if you're a Ukrainian civilian, stay away from defense industry. That means if you're a housewife making drones, you might want to stop making drones. And if you're living in a building, that the basement's being used to assemble drone parts, you might want to say, get that the hell out of here because it's going. The Russians will do this over time. It's not, again, when you have a $50 million Oreshnik, you're just not going to waste it to make a statement. They already made the statement. They fired two that way. And the third one they fired actually did something of significance. But again, the Russians they don't need to impress anybody about Oreshnik. Been there, done that. They got 3 T-shirts. The next time the Oreshnik's fired, it's going to be to take out a specific target for a specific purpose. The same thing with all the other Iskanders and like Kinzhals and all the other different precision-guided, hypersonic, long-range strike weapons. They're not going to waste them, for a light. This isn't shock and awe. This is, we're going to kill the bastards. And Russia's in the business of killing the bastards. And it's going to unfold on a timeline that Russia dictates over a calendar that Russia decides. In the West, there's a lot of people waiting for the big show. I think you'll be disappointed. I think there will be shows. I think some of them may be big, but it's not going to be the carpet bombing of Kiev. It's going to be a campaign that destroys Ukraine's leadership capacity, ability to command and control this conflict, and to produce weapons. And this conflict, this may extend outside, because as Russia terminates defense industry capacity, it's going to flow outside to NATO countries. And if NATO seeks to, for instance, the FP5 Flamingo, if they continue to provide this to Ukraine, who continues to launch it, the Russians may start striking the Flamingo production facilities in the United Kingdom, Germany, Denmark, and elsewhere.
Yeah, fair enough. Scott, we got some breaking news. Donald Trump, the person you'll be speaking about, has made another statement. Apparently, the United States of America are going to be lifting the blockade. He said that the US will be lifting the blockade. And apparently, he's in the Situation Room to make some kind of final decision, whether it's a deal or not. But apparently, the blockade has been lifted.
Well, it has to. I mean, again, we lost the war. We didn't win the war. We lost the war. And we have to have oil flowing, 100%. But my bet is that we're going to find a way to screw this up. Not because Trump has to spin this as not the lifting of the blockade, but we won the war, therefore there's no need for a blockade and all that. But how do you do that when $300 billion of reparation being paid? He has to find a way to put lipstick on this pig. And I don't know if he's found that yet, but he has no choice. I've said straight up, we have no choice. We lost the war. We are looking at political collapse of Donald Trump after economic collapse. This summer is going to be a very hard summer, no matter what happens. What Donald Trump needs to ensure is after we have the collapse of July, there's a recovery in August. And if we can have a recovery in August, he can say, that's on me. That happened because I made decisions. I beat the Iranians. I spun this the way I want. And now look, the price of gas is going down. Everything's good. Come on November, vote for me. I'm the guy you need to vote for. That's his only chance. So he has to do this. He has no choice. But again, let's just wait, because the insane man is going to, we need to reimpose the blockade because the blockade isn't really lifted. We just temporarily pulled it back. But Pete takes us ready to reimpose at any moment. The Iranians don't abide by this. We'll be watching them. We'll be watching them from afar. We're never far away. I mean, that's the kind of crap he's going to pull. You can't admit that we got our asses kicked and we're going to have to flee home and put Band-Aids on the wounds. No, he's going to have to pretend that we're the dog doing the peeing.
No doubt. Scott, I know people can support you in many ways. I know you've got some amazing work that you're going to be doing in Russia, some project that you haven't told everyone about, but it's something amazing. How can people support you? Because I know you're an independent journalist, you work on your own, and you try and give people the best analysis that there is out there. So how can people help support the work that you do? And I know you've got your own Substack. On which other ways?
Well, the best way is to go to scottritter.com. That takes you to my Substack. First of all, understand my Substack is not under a paywall. All the analytical work I do free of charge, meaning that because look, a lot of the people that write me are pensioners. They're like, Scott, I got my pension. I don't have any. I can't, subscribe. I never asked you to. I'm writing for you. The goal of what I do is to empower people with knowledge and information, to bring the reality of Russia to America. And if I put a paywall on that, that sort of cheapens what I'm trying to do. So my work is open to everybody, free of charge. Go to my Substack and you will find it. There's some exceptions. For instance, I self-published a book.
Today, I'm going to be explaining a crazy controversy that demonstrates how the United States is still waging a new Cold War against China. And this scandal includes a bit of everything. It includes great power competition and geopolitical conflict. It includes an attempt by the US to literally colonize part of the territory of one of its so-called allies. It involves corruption and artificial intelligence and Silicon Valley and big tech corporations and much more. So in order to understand the larger context of this controversy, I need to emphasize that if you listen to hawkish think tanks in Washington, D.C., they, for years now, have been openly saying that the United States is waging a new Cold War against China, Cold War II. And just because Donald Trump took a visit to Beijing this May does not mean that we're not in a new Cold War. In fact, it has been widely acknowledged in the Western media that this trip was largely a failure because Trump failed to pressure China to sign trade agreements that benefit the US, which Trump thought he could do, but of course, he failed to do so. But regardless of whether or not it was considered a failure, just because Trump took this trip to Beijing does not mean that the US is suddenly not trying to contain China and prevent China from technologically and economically developing. In fact, just a few days before Trump visited China, the US government imposed more sanctions on Chinese companies because they're doing business with Iran. And this led Beijing to push back and order all domestic companies to ignore US sanctions. And that's not all. While the US is continuing this economic war against China, the Trump administration has also been making some moves to try to cut China out of a new supply chain. So just a few days after Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio traveled to China, Rubio then went to India. And this May, the US and India signed a historic agreement to try to create a new supply chain for critical minerals. And if you read the Indian media's coverage of this agreement, it makes it very clear that this is all about China, because China dominates the global supply chain for critical minerals. And these critical minerals are very important, not only for big tech corporations in order to make tech products like computers and phones and electric vehicles and semiconductors, but also because the military industrial complex in the US, the US military needs these critical minerals in order to make its weapon systems. So this is why the US government, under Trump's second administration, launched an initiative called Pax Silica, which is an attempt to create a new global supply chain for semiconductors, for chips, for US big tech corporations. And that new supply chain will cut out China. That's the goal of Pax Silica. And the Trump administration succeeded in pressuring India to join this new initiative. So the US government wants to pressure many of these big tech corporations to move their factories and their investment out of China and instead to reshore or friendshore those factories and that investment in India to create this new US-dominated supply chain. And another country that's involved in this initiative, aside from India, is the Philippines. And today I'm going to be explaining how the US government has been trying to colonize part of the Philippines, which it considers to be a so-called ally. This has been a huge scandal inside the Philippines, and it's getting a little coverage in the Western media, although it's not getting enough attention, which is why I wanted to do this analysis today. And this issue was brought to my attention by a friend of the show, Arnaud Bertrand, who's a great French geopolitical analyst, and he's a very good writer who has a Substack that you should subscribe to. And on Twitter, Arnaud shared this story about how the US is literally trying to recolonize part of the Philippines as part of this so-called Pax Silica initiative. And he noted that this has caused outrage in the Philippines. For months now, there have been large protests in general about the US militarization of the Philippines. Protesters have burned effigies of Donald Trump to protest joint military exercise conducted between the US and the Philippines. The current leader of the country is a right-wing Trump ally. His name is Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He's known as Bong Bong Marcos. And he is the son of the former right-wing dictator of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos, who governed with an iron fist from 1965 until 1981. And he was an obedient US ally in the first Cold War, who was extremely anti-communist, very right-wing, very pro-capitalist. The Marcos dictatorship, backed by the US, stole at least $10 billion from the people of the Philippines. And that's a conservative figure. Some scholars and journalists have estimated that up to $30 billion was stolen by this corrupt dynasty of the US-backed dictator Ferdinand Marcos and his wife, Imelda Marcos. And she was notorious for having thousands of pairs of shoes and luxury goods and fancy clothes. Meanwhile, during his dictatorship, more than 3,200 Filipinos were killed or disappeared, 70,000 were imprisoned, and 34,000 were tortured. Again, this was carried out by one of the closest U.S. allies during the First Cold War. And today, his son is the new president of the Philippines. And by the way, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Bongbong Marcos, is also extremely corrupt. A clear example of this that caused a scandal in the Philippines was how Bongbong Marcos used the presidential helicopter to fly to go see a Coldplay concert, which, by the way, he also has horrible taste in music, in addition to being a corrupt U.S. puppet. But anyway, regardless, the point that I'm emphasizing here is that in this new Cold War that the U.S. is waging against China, the Philippines, under this corrupt comprador leader who's willing to sell out his country to the U.S. to enrich himself, under Marcos, the Philippines has become yet another key U.S. proxy in the new Cold War against China. And in fact, Bongbong Marcos has given the U.S. military permission to use several other bases in the Philippines. The U.S. military now has access to at least 9 military bases in the Philippines, and that's probably a conservative estimate. There may be more we don't know about. And why does the U.S. military want to use all of these bases in the Philippines? Well, it's because the U.S. military is using them to threaten China. And this is bipartisan. It's not just Trump. In fact, under the Joe Biden administration, the U.S. military deployed offensive missile systems to Japan and the Philippines. The missile systems located in the northern part of the Philippines are called the Typhoon medium-range missile systems, and they have the range of several thousand kilometers and can hit most of the major cities in the Chinese mainland. So the U.S. military is directly threatening China. And again, this deployment started under Biden and has continued under Trump in his second term, despite the fact that Trump took this trip to Beijing and tried to butter up China's President Xi Jinping and act as though everything was okay. But obviously, Beijing understood that the U.S. is still waging this new Cold War, and the U.S. is still trying to contain China and threaten China, not only economically, but also militarily, which explains, by the way, why it was not a surprise that Trump's trip was a complete failure. Beijing was not interested in helping out the country that is waging a new Cold War against it. So this brings us back to this scandal that was discussed by the geopolitical analyst Arnaud Bertrand. Arnaud was responding to an article that was published in the Wall Street Journal titled U.S. to Create High-Tech Manufacturing Zone in Philippines. And this report makes it clear that this is all about trying to contain China. I'm reading here from the Wall Street Journal, quote, an agreement with the Philippines to establish a high-tech industrial hub is the Trump administration's latest effort to lessen China's dominance over global supply chains, end quote. And the article noted that the Philippine government has given the U.S. access to a massive 4,000-acre site, and this is located on the northernmost island of the Philippines, Luzon. Now, what is especially scandalous about this story is that it's essentially colonialism, because the Philippine government is not just giving the U.S. government access to its land. According to the Wall Street Journal, I'm reading, quote, the U.S. will occupy the site rent-free and administer it as a special economic zone. The hub will have diplomatic immunity, such as the protections afforded to an American embassy, and operate under U.S. common law, the first agreement of its kind anywhere in the world. The 2-year lease is renewable for 99 years, end quote. This is straight up colonialism. The right-wing corrupt regime in the Philippines, run by the son of the former U.S. puppet dictator, according to the Wall Street Journal, is allowing the U.S. to take over 4,000 acres of territory in this geostrategic location to create a manufacturing hub, and this territory will follow U.S. law in the Philippines. And what's even crazier, adding insult to injury, making it so clear that this is a colonial agreement, is the fact that the U.S. is being offered a concession of 99 years. Now, if you know the history of Western colonialism, that should sound familiar. This is exactly what the British Empire did, and the French Empire, and other Western colonial empires. When they took over territory in countries in the global south, they forced the governments in those global south countries to give them concessions of 99 years. For instance, during what's known in China as the Century of Humiliation, after the British Empire waged the 2 Opium Wars, which were colonial wars of aggression against China at that time under the Qing dynasty, the British Empire forced the Chinese authorities to give the UK a 99-year lease to control Hong Kong. And as the British newspaper The Independent pointed out, at the time, it was assumed that the British Empire would always control Hong Kong. The concession of 99 years was expected to be renewed every 99 years, and that Hong Kong would forever be a British colony. And by the way, this is why the Western imperial powers have been very angry about the fact that China did reincorporate Hong Kong into its territory and ended British colonialism in Hong Kong and ended Portuguese colonialism in Macau. And by the way, I should point out that this is especially scandalous in the case of the Philippines because the US empire literally colonized the Philippines after the Spanish-American War in 1898, which was an inter-imperialist war between the declining Spanish Empire and the rising US empire. And the US empire took over several Spanish colonial possessions, including the Philippines, as well as Guam, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. And today, the Trump administration is trying to recolonize Cuba. And Puerto Rico, still to this day, along with Guam, remain US colonies. They are so-called territories. They're colonies. And the Philippines was previously a US colony until it did eventually achieve independence in the 20th century. So this is why the details laid out in this article in the Wall Street Journal are especially scandalous, because the US empire is now trying to recolonize the Philippines, and the corrupt right-wing comprador government in the Philippines is willing to sell out its country to the US empire. So it's entirely understandable why this has caused massive outrage in the Philippines with large protests. But what's especially ironic about all of this is the US tells the Philippines that it's going to supposedly protect it. And the US claims that China is supposedly such a threat. So US propaganda tries to warn people in the Philippines, be afraid of China, be so afraid. While it's actually the US empire that is colonizing Philippine territory while claiming to protect the Philippines from China. And of course, the reason the US is using to justify all of this is China. I mean, it's just so insanely hypocritical. This article in the Wall Street Journal cites a top US State Department official, the Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs, Jacob Hellberg. I'll explain who he is in a second. He's very closely linked to Silicon Valley billionaire oligarchs. And in this article in the Wall Street Journal, he made it clear that everything is about China. He said, quote, "If you look at the whole supply chain stack, layer after layer, it is totally dominated by China," end quote. So the plan of the US government and big tech corporations in Silicon Valley, and of course, the US government serves the interests of these large corporations. Their goal is to use the natural resources of the Philippines to exploit those resources in order to cut out China. I'm reading here from the Wall Street Journal, quote, "The Philippines has sources of nickel, copper, chromite, and cobalt that will be both used by American companies operating there and exported back to the US for manufacturing," Hellberg said. "The Philippines is among the most mineral-rich countries and the world's second largest producer of nickel," end quote. So it's all so clear what the US government's initiative Pax Silica is all about. It's about cutting China out of the supply chain and creating a new supply chain that enriches US corporations, big billionaire capitalist oligarchs. This was admitted openly now in the Wall Street Journal. In the photo that I'm showing here of the US government launching Pax Silica, you can see the man who is involved in helping to create this initiative. It is the Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs, Jacob Hellberg. He's the one with the glasses on. Now, who is Jacob Hellberg? He is Silicon Valley's representative in the State Department. The US media has dubbed him Silicon Valley's Trump whisperer, and it's not a coincidence that he's married to one of the most powerful billionaire oligarchs in Silicon Valley, Keith Rabois. Now, who exactly is Keith Rabois? He was one of the Silicon Valley oligarchs who was part of what Fortune magazine dubbed the PayPal Mafia. This is a group of Silicon Valley tech bros and venture capitalists, many of whom later became powerful right-wing oligarchs who support Donald Trump. In the middle of the photo here, you can see Keith Rabois, who is the husband of the U.S. Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs, overseeing Pax Silica and these anti-China operations. Also in the photo of the PayPal Mafia, you can see Peter Thiel, the far-right billionaire oligarch venture capitalist who funded Donald Trump. And behind him, you can see another billionaire oligarch, David Sachs, who is now officially working for Donald Trump. He is the Trump administration's AI and crypto czar. That's his official title, the AI and crypto czar. And Elon Musk was also part of the PayPal Mafia, but he was not there for that photo shoot. And as is often the case, Musk had a falling out with many of these other oligarchs in Silicon Valley. But anyway, the point is that Jacob Hellberg, this top U.S. State Department official, is married to this powerful billionaire oligarch in Silicon Valley, and he represents the interests of big tech corporations in the U.S. government. And what's quite funny is that Jacob Hellberg saw the viral post that was written by Arnaud Bertrand. And of course, many Trump administration officials just spend all day sitting on Twitter now that it's owned by their friend and oligarch patron, Elon Musk. And Hellberg angrily attacked Arnaud on Twitter. He boasted that Pax Silica is, quote, fundamentally a capitalist project. This might be foreign to you, end quote. And this US government official repeatedly emphasized the fact that Arnaud is French, that he's a foreigner, that he's not American. Therefore, Hellberg's implication is that no one should care what Arnaud has to say, which is completely ridiculous, especially coming from a top US State Department official. And the State Department is supposed to oversee diplomacy, although we all know that the US empire doesn't actually engage in diplomacy. It engages in threats and blackmail and war, not diplomacy. Anyway, this is the most important part of the post, which says so much about the priorities of the US government and the State Department. This top US State Department official wrote on Twitter, quote, "The US is home to the world's largest technology companies, a fact I'm sure deeply irritates you," end quote. And then he said that Arnaud has a, quote, ignorant loser mentality. Again, this is a top State Department official who is publicly saying on Twitter that a critic has an ignorant loser mentality and that actually he's just jealous because France doesn't have the large tech companies, these big tech monopolies that Silicon Valley has. Once again, Hellberg was demonstrating whose interests he truly serves. It's not the interests of the American people, not the working class. It's the interests of Silicon Valley capitalist oligarchs, these big billionaires like his husband, the billionaire oligarch from Silicon Valley, Keith Rabois, and Donald Trump, who is himself a billionaire oligarch who is extremely corrupt and has made billions of dollars from being president. But I should point out that Arnaud Bertrand had an excellent response to Jacob Hellberg. He pointed out, Hellberg denied the facts that were reported in this Wall Street Journal article, but the source in the Wall Street Journal article was him. It was Hellberg himself. So he's now denying the details that he revealed in the Wall Street Journal. Moreover, Arnaud pointed out the hypocrisy that Hellberg praised the Taiwanese company, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. This is the world's most important company when it comes to manufacturing advanced chips used for AI training. NVIDIA, the US company, which is now the most valuable company on earth by market capitalization, has a market cap of more than $5.5 trillion. NVIDIA designs the chips, but they are physically manufactured by TSMC. And Arnaud pointed out the irony that under Trump, the US government has accused TSMC of supposedly stealing US technology, and the US has been trying to blackmail and pressure Taiwan to force TSMC to move its factories over to the US. The US forced TSMC and provided some subsidies and such to build a factory in Arizona. And Arnaud pointed out that when a US so-called partner has real capabilities, it's unbearable to Washington. Washington does not reward those capabilities. It calls its so-called partners and allies thieves and tries to take their industry away from them. And we see this not only with the pro-US separatist forces in Taiwan, whom the US has been supporting for many years, but when a Taiwanese company challenges Silicon Valley big tech monopolies, suddenly the US turns against its so-called allies. We also see the same thing in the Philippines. And I'm going to read part of this tweet by Arnaud Bertrand because I think he put it very well. He noted that the Philippine government agency, whose entire reason for existing is to turn former American colonial territory, i.e. US military bases, into sovereign Philippine land, is the one now being asked to hand part of that very same land back under US jurisdiction, and apparently declined. It's in a gray area. This scandal that this issue has caused has pressured the Philippine government to take a step back because obviously it's so humiliating on the international stage. But regardless of the fine details, Arnaud pointed out the bigger picture here. The Philippines is still a signatory of this initiative, PAC Silica, and PAC Silica itself is structurally neo-colonial. These foreign countries that are so-called US allies supply the cheap labor and raw materials. They align their export controls and regulations with Washington. They cut themselves off from China, which is the world's rising technological powerhouse. And in exchange, they get a few low-paid assembly jobs and the privilege of getting a pat on the head by Trump and being called a so-called trusted partner. But of course, that status of being a trusted partner doesn't mean anything because the US will abandon them anytime it's convenient. This is why, as Arnaud put, maybe they dropped the most cartoonishly colonial demand governing Philippine soil under US law, but the underlying architecture is the same. You serve the US supply chain on the USA's terms, and you relinquish your sovereign right to trade with whoever offers you the best deal. I think Arnaud put the nail on the head. He's a friend of the show. He's a great analyst. Again, you should go check out his Substack. But before I conclude, I want to say a few more words about the Philippines, because I think the current U.S. puppet leader of the Philippines, Bongbong Marcos, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he is the epitome of what happens when you have a government that is led by these comprador elites who are willing to sell out their country, and they do not care one bit about the interests of the working class. The Spanish language has the best word for these corrupt comprador leaders. It is vende patria. Vende patria. It literally means to sell your homeland. And we see this with many of the right-wing pro-US leaders in Latin America. For instance, Argentina's libertarian, self-declared anarcho-capitalist leader, Javier Milei, who has been selling out his country to US corporations and Elon Musk. Or in the case of Ecuador, the current right-wing dictator is named Daniel Noboa, who is the son of the richest billionaire oligarch in the country. His family is extremely corrupt and linked to organized crime, and he's also a US citizen. And under his rule, his right-wing dictatorship, Ecuador has become the most dangerous country in Latin America with the highest homicide rate. Public services have collapsed. There are constant blackouts. Infrastructure is falling apart. It's a failed state. And this is exactly what happens when you have these corrupt comprador leaders who serve the interests of the US empire and US capitalists at the expense of their own country. The data shows it very clearly. If you look at poverty statistics for the Philippines, you can see that if you measure relative poverty at the share of the population living on less than $10 per day, and this is adjusted for living costs with the domestic currency, You can see that in China, which has a socialist government led by an independent communist party that does not allow US corporations in Washington to determine its policy, to dictate its policy. In China, poverty has collapsed. The Chinese government has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, this poverty rate, there are different ways to measure poverty. This poverty measurement of the share of the population living on less than $10 a day has not changed in the past 30 years. Since 1990, 80% of the population of the Philippines has been living in this measurement of relative poverty. Well, in China, in Brazil, countries that have independent leaders, they have reduced poverty significantly. Another example of a success story is Vietnam. Vietnam has a system that is very similar politically and economically to the socialist system of China. China and Vietnam are both governed by communist parties. China officially calls its system a socialist market economy. Vietnam's system, since the reform in the 1990s, the market reforms, is called a socialist-oriented market economy. And China and Vietnam have been remarkably successful in reducing poverty and raising wages, income, consumption levels. If you measure mean income, that is average income or consumption per day, you can see that in China and Vietnam, it has increased by over 10 times since 1990. In the Philippines, it's increased by $1 or $2. So this is the difference between having an independent, working class oriented government that represents the interests of the nation and the working class and not the interests of US corporations. Whereas China and Vietnam are major success stories that everyone around the world, everyone in the global south, should look toward the model that Vietnam and China implemented to learn from their models. They are major success stories. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you have the Philippines, which is a complete failure in every metric. And yet, instead of trying to reconsider the abject failure of the Philippine government's political and economic policies, the corrupt oligarchs who govern the Philippines are once again betraying their people to serve the interests of US corporations and the US empire as it wages a new Cold War against China. On that note, I'm going to conclude. I am Ben Norton. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Please like and subscribe. Please share this. I will see you all next time.
Coffee. Follow me.